The Simpsons has been on the air since December 17th, 1989. That first episode, Simpsons Roasting on an Open Fire, was directed by David Silverman and written by Mimi Pond. It aired on a fledgling Fox network that most Americans barely watched. And somehow, against every odd, the show is still going. 37 seasons, over 800 episodes, renewed through season 40. It outlasted Seinfeld, Friends, The Sopranos, Breaking Bad, and almost every other show that's ever been called the greatest of all time. It even surpassed Gunsmoke's episode count back in season 29, which happened around 2017. Most people know The Simpsons as a family sitcom. Homer works at a nuclear power plant and does a bad job. Marge holds the family together with a patience that borders on sainthood. Bart causes trouble. Lisa plays saxophone and worries about the environment. Maggie sucks on a pacifier and occasionally shoots people. It's a simple show about simple things set in a town called Springfield that could be anywhere in America. But buried inside those 800 episodes are moments where the show abandons all of that. Where the animation warps and stretches, where the laws of physics dissolve, where characters find themselves in places no family sitcom was ever supposed to go. Hallucination sequences animated by hand because the director didn't trust anyone else to get them right. Entire episodes where the art style changes completely. Storylines where Homer falls through a portal into the third dimension, or where Springfield's tap water gets spiked with psychedelic juice, or where the whole family gets brainwashed into joining a cult that worships a man who promises to fly them to a planet called Blistonia. Tonight, we're going to walk through the trippiest, most surreal, most reality-bending episodes The Simpsons has ever produced. We're going deep on each one, how they were made, what inspired them, what happens in them scene by scene, and what they actually mean when you look at them closely enough. Some of these are Treehouse of Horror segments, those annual Halloween specials the show has been doing since 1990. Some of them are regular canonical episodes where the writers just decided to get weird. Either way, they represent something the show has always been willing to do, that most sitcoms would never attempt. They take the comfortable, familiar world of Springfield and turn it inside out. This is going to be a long one. There's no rush. Settle in. Let the details wash over you. We're going to take our time, move slowly from one episode to the next, and let each story breathe. Think of it as Simpsons lore told the way it should be told. Quietly, thoroughly. With all the strange little production details and behind-the-scenes stories that make these episodes worth revisiting. Let's start with what might be the single trippiest episode in the history of the show. An episode about hot peppers, a hallucination in the desert, a talking coyote voiced by Johnny Cash, and a man who wakes up on a golf course wondering if his wife is really his soulmate. The episode is called El Viaje Misterioso de Nuestro Homer. In English, that translates to The Mysterious Voyage of Our Homer. It's the 9th episode of Season 8. It aired on January 5th, 1997 on the Fox network. It was written by Ken Keeler, who would later go on to write for Futurama, and directed by Jim Reardon. The showrunners at the time were Bill Oakley and Josh Weinstein, and the episode features one guest star whose voice changes the entire texture of the story, Johnny Cash, the man in black himself, voicing a mystical coyote who appears to Homer during a hallucinogenic vision in the desert. But the origins of this episode go back much further than Season 8. The idea was first pitched during Season 3, around 1991 or 1992, by writer George Meyer. Meyer was fascinated by the works of Carlos Castaneda, a Peruvian-American author who wrote a series of books in the 1960s and 70s about his experiences with a Yaqui Indian shaman named Don Juan Matus. In Castaneda's most famous book, The Teachings of Don Juan, the narrator ingests peyote and has a mystical experience in the desert, playing with a wild coyote that may or may not be a hallucination. Meyer wanted to do something similar with Homer. He wanted a mystical voyage, a genuine spiritual experience. But he also wanted it to feel grounded in the world of the show, so he decided the hallucination shouldn't be caused by drugs. Instead, he landed on the idea of extremely hot chili peppers. Ridiculously hot. Impossibly hot. Hot enough to break a man's grip on reality. The rest of the writing staff, except for Matt Groening, thought the idea was too strange for the show at that point. Season 3 was still early in the show's run, the humor was sharpening, but the tone was still relatively grounded. An extended psychedelic hallucination sequence felt like a bridge too far, so the idea sat on a shelf for years. It wasn't until Bill Oakley and Josh Weinstein took over as showrunners for season 8 that someone finally dusted it off and said, "Let's do this." The episode begins with Marge trying to keep a secret from Homer. The annual Springfield chili cook-off is happening, and Marge doesn't want Homer to know about it. The reason is simple. The previous year, Homer got drunk at the cook-off and embarrassed himself. There's a flashback that shows exactly what happened. Homer, after drinking too much beer, stripped off all his clothes and climbed into a cotton candy machine, pretending to be what he called a puffy pink cloud. So this year, Marge is taking precautions. She cuts the advertisement out of the newspaper before Homer can see it. She disconnects a phone call between Homer and Lenny when Lenny starts to mention the event. She even lights a cigarette to mask the smell of chili wafting across town from the cook-off grounds. None of it works, of course. Homer finds out, and the whole family ends up at the cook-off. And this is where the episode starts having fun. Homer walks through the festival, sampling everyone's chili with the confidence of a man who considers himself an expert. He critiques each one dismissively. Nothing is hot enough for him. Nothing impresses his supposedly iron tongue. This goes on until he arrives at Chief Wiggum's booth. Wiggum has been waiting for Homer. He has a special batch prepared just for him. And when he describes what's in it, the language is so deliberately over the top that it becomes a kind of poetry. "The merciless peppers of Quetzalcoatlanango," he says, "grown deep in the jungle primeval by the inmates of a Guatemalan insane asylum." The name itself is a playful mashup of real Guatemalan place names. Quetzal is a Central American bird and the currency of Guatemala. Acatenango is a real volcano in the country. Quetzaltenango is the second largest city. The writers blended all of these together into a fictional pepper name that sounds both exotic and slightly menacing. Homer takes a bite and immediately loses. The peppers are too hot even for him. He staggers away, humiliated, desperately searching for something to drink. In his panic, he nearly drinks a container of melted candle wax, but Ralph Wiggum stops him with a simple warning. That's candle wax. And this tiny moment, this throwaway line from Ralph, gives Homer the idea that changes everything. He realizes that if he coats the inside of his mouth with candle wax, it will protect him from the heat. It's a ridiculous plan. A Fox Censors note actually told the writers to make the wax coating scene look painful so that impressionable viewers wouldn't try it at home. Homer returns to Wiggum's booth, mouth coated in wax, and eats several Guatemalan insanity peppers in rapid succession. The crowd is shocked. Wiggum is scared. Homer has won. But victory comes at a cost. The peppers may not have burned his mouth, but they're doing something much worse to his stomach, and then his brain. Homer stumbles away from the cook-off as reality begins to fracture around him. This is where the episode transforms into something entirely different from a normal Simpsons episode. Homer runs through Springfield and the world starts to warp. The familiar yellow sky, four-fingered world of the show dissolves into something dreamlike. People's faces stretch and distort. Ned Flanders appears and speaks in a stream of nonsensical syllables that accelerates into gibberish. The actual line that Flanders says was processed on a Macintosh computer so that it increased in speed and pitch, turning a normal greeting into something that sounds alien. Edna Krabappel appears, and her voice has been replaced by the sound of a muted trumpet, a direct reference to how the teachers sound in the animated Peanuts specials. Jasper Beardley shows up and says, "Goo goo gajoob," the famous nonsensical lyrics from the Beatles' "I Am the Walrus." And then Homer is somewhere else entirely. He's in a desert, a vast, empty, surreal landscape where the laws of physics don't apply. The sky is the wrong color. The ground ripples like water. He breaks the sun with his fist, and it shatters into pieces that fall around him. A puddle on the ground transforms into a snake. The world is alive in ways that the normal Simpsons world never is. Everything moves differently. The colors are richer. The backgrounds have a soft, rendered quality that looks nothing like the flat, cel-animated look of the show. There's a very specific reason for that. Most of the hallucination sequence was animated personally by David Silverman, one of the show's original directors. Silverman directed the very first episode of the series back in 1989, and he was deeply invested in getting the sequence right. Normally, the show's animation was done by studios in South Korea, The Simpsons team in Los Angeles would create the storyboards and key animation, then send the work overseas for the labor-intensive process of in-betweening and coloring. But Silverman didn't want to take that risk with this sequence. He wanted it to look exactly as he imagined it. So he animated most of it himself, right there in Los Angeles. He used rendered backgrounds to give the desert a soft, mystical feel that was completely unlike anything else in the show. He deliberately drew the coyote in a blockier, more angular style, inspired by representations of coyotes in American Southwestern art, so that it would look otherworldly and distinct from the regular Simpsons character designs. Some 3D computer animation was even used for a giant butterfly that appears during the hallucination, making this one of the earliest uses of CGI in the show's run. A tortoise appears and guides Homer to a pyramid. Homer kicks the tortoise because it's moving too slowly, which offends it. In retaliation, the tortoise makes the pyramid grow to an enormous height instead of the small step-ladder-sized structure that was originally planned. Homer has to climb the entire thing. At the summit, he meets his spirit guide, a coyote, voiced by Johnny Cash. The coyote sits there, calm and knowing, and tells Homer that there's a lesson he needs to learn. Homer immediately assumes the lesson is to lay off the insanity peppers, which makes the coyote sigh with the patience of someone who has dealt with a lot of idiots. No, the coyote says, the lesson is that Homer needs to find his soulmate. And when Homer says that his soulmate is Marge, the coyote questions it. Are you sure? The question hangs in the air. The coyote tells Homer to look deeper, to think about whether the person he's married to is truly the one he's meant to be with. And then a ghost train comes barreling straight toward Homer on top of the pyramid. The scene at the end of the hallucination, when the train heads toward Homer, is a reference to the opening titles of Soul Train. And just like that, the vision ends. Homer wakes up on a golf course. He's been lying there all night, unconscious. And in a beautiful piece of writing, he immediately starts rationalizing everything he experienced. Maybe the desert was just this sand trap, he says. And that crazy pyramid was just the pro shop. And that talking coyote was just a talking dog. A real dog then appears and says, "Hi, Homer, find your soulmate." Homer stares at it for a moment and then says, "Hey, wait a minute. There's no such thing as a talking dog." The dog barks. "Damn straight," Homer says. But the coyote's question has planted something in Homer's mind. He goes home and finds Marge angry with him. Helen Lovejoy, the Reverend's gossipy wife, told Marge about Homer's behavior at the cook-off. But Helen didn't know about the peppers. She only saw the aftermath, which looked like Homer was drunk. So Marge thinks Homer broke his promise not to drink. They fight, and Homer, still haunted by the coyote's words, starts to wonder if Marge really is his soulmate. If she doesn't understand him, maybe someone else out there does. What follows is a quiet, melancholy middle section where Homer wanders through Springfield looking for his soulmate. The song At 17 by Janice Ian plays in the background as Homer searches among his friends, his acquaintances, even strangers. He doesn't discriminate by gender, notably. He checks with his male friends too, which the show plays as a gentle moment of Homer being open-minded without making a big deal about it. Nobody fits, nobody understands him. Eventually, Homer sees a lighthouse. He concludes that the lighthouse operator must be the loneliest person in town, and therefore the perfect soulmate candidate. He gets excited and runs to meet this person, whose name, according to a sign on the door, is Earl. But when Homer gets inside, he discovers that Earl is a machine. EARL, Electronic Automatic Robotic Lighthouse. The lighthouse keeper actually being a computer is a reference to the Twilight Zone episode The Old Man in the Cave, in which a man in a cave turns out to be a computer. Homer, in a fit of frustration, destroys the lighthouse's giant bulb. But Marge arrives, having realized she was wrong to assume Homer was drinking. They reconcile, they fix the bulb together. A ship that was about to run aground sees the light just in time and changes course. Homer and Marge agree that they really are soulmates. The coyote was wrong. Or maybe the coyote was right all along, because the journey is what made Homer appreciate what he had. The ship runs aground anyway, despite the light, spilling its cargo of hot pants across the shore. The entire town shows up and helps themselves to free hot pants, while Marge and Homer sit together watching. The episode ends with the Royal Teens Short Shorts playing over the credits. In its original broadcast, El Viaje Misterioso finished 34th in ratings for the week of December 30th, 1996, through January 5th, 1997, with a Nielsen rating of 9.0, equivalent to roughly 8.7 million viewing households. It was the highest-rated show on the Fox network that week. On IMDb, the episode holds an 8.6 out of 10 rating, placing it among the most beloved episodes in the show's entire run. Fred Topel of Crave Online named it the best episode of the entire series. IGN ranked Johnny Cash's performance as the 14th best guest appearance in the show's history. The episode was later adapted into a playable level in the 2015 video game LEGO Dimensions, reusing actual audio from Johnny Cash's recording session. What makes this episode linger isn't just the visuals, though those are extraordinary. It's the emotional core underneath the psychedelia. Homer's hallucination isn't random, it's purposeful. The coyote asks a question that Homer has probably never asked himself. Is the life you're living really the one you're meant to live? Is the person sleeping next to you really the person you're meant to be with? These are frightening questions for anyone, let alone a man whose entire identity is built around the comfortable routine of beer, television, donuts, and a wife who tolerates him. The Peppers didn't just make Homer see weird things, they made him see himself. And that might be the trippiest thing of all, that chili pepper sequence might be the most famous hallucination in Simpsons history. But it's far from the only time the show shattered its own visual rules. A year earlier, the show did something that had never been attempted in television animation before. They sent Homer Simpson into the third dimension, not metaphorically, literally. They took a two-dimensional character who had existed on a flat plane for 6 years and dropped him into a three-dimensional computer-generated world. And then, because that wasn't strange enough, they dropped him into live-action Los Angeles. The segment is called Homer Cubed, written as Homer with a superscript 3, and it's the third and final segment of Treehouse of Horror 6. The episode is Season 7, Episode 6. It aired on October 29, 1995. The Treehouse of Horror tradition had been running since 1990, when the very first Halloween special aired on October 25th as the third episode of Season 2. By 1995, the format was well established. 3 non-canon segments per episode, each parodying horror, science fiction, or fairy tales. Special opening credits. Permission to kill characters, destroy Springfield, or do anything else that would be impossible in the regular show. As of Season 37, there have been 36 Treehouse of Horror episodes, numbered with Roman numerals from 1 through 36. But Homer Cubed stands apart from almost all of them because of what it did visually. The setup is deceptively simple. Patty and Selma, Marge's twin sisters, come to visit. Homer, who despises them with every fiber of his being, decides to hide rather than spend an evening listening to them talk about their foot problems and cigarette brands. He slips behind a bookcase in the living room, and behind that bookcase he finds something impossible. A portal, a doorway into another dimension. Homer falls through and lands in a world that looks nothing like the one he left. Everything is three-dimensional. The ground has depth. Objects have volume. Light behaves differently, casting real shadows instead of the flat, solid colors of the normal Simpsons universe. Homer himself has been rendered in CGI, his familiar two-dimensional form now given a third axis. He has thickness. He has mass. He casts a shadow on a ground that extends in all directions. The effect, watching it in 1995, was genuinely unsettling. For 6 years, Homer Simpson had existed as a flat drawing. He was defined by his outline. Now suddenly he was occupying space in a way that felt wrong, uncanny, like seeing a photograph come to life. The three-dimensional world Homer finds himself in looks like the inside of a computer chip. It's a grid, a void, an empty digital space with geometric shapes floating in the distance. Homer wanders around, touching things, trying to understand where he is. He delivers one of his most famous lines in the process. This looks like something out of that Twilight-y show about that zone. He can't quite remember the name of the Twilight Zone, but he knows the vibe. Back in two-dimensional Springfield, the family tries to figure out how to rescue Homer. Professor Frink is called in. Bart reaches through the portal and Homer grabs his hand, but the physics don't cooperate. The two dimensions can't connect properly. Meanwhile, Homer's doing Homer things in the third dimension. He throws a cone and it bounces around the space. He creates a small rip in the fabric of the 3D world. That rip becomes a tear. The tear becomes a black hole. The entire space begins collapsing in on itself, sucking everything toward a singularity. Homer runs, the 3D world crumbles behind him. He leaps toward the black hole and is pulled through it, vanishing from the collapsing digital space. And then he appears somewhere no one expected. He's standing on a sidewalk, a real sidewalk, in live-action Los Angeles. Real cars drive past him, real buildings tower above him. A real person walks by and glances at him. Homer Simpson, a yellow cartoon character with an overbite and 4 fingers, is standing in the actual physical world. It was the first time the show had ever used live-action footage. The shot of Homer standing in real-world LA is brief but electrifying. He looks around, confused, overwhelmed by the depth and detail of reality. He sees a store called Erotic Cakes and walks toward it. The segment ends there, leaving Homer stranded in our world. The 3D animation for this segment was produced by Pacific Data Images, commonly known as PDI. This is the same company that would later merge with DreamWorks Animation and go on to produce the Shrek films and other major CGI features. In 1995, PDI was still a relatively small visual effects house, and their work on Homer Cubed was considered cutting edge. This was the same year that Pixar released Toy Story, the first fully computer-animated feature film. CGI was still new, still experimental, still something that audiences associated more with special effects in live-action movies than with television animation. For a weekly animated sitcom to dedicate an entire segment to computer-generated imagery was genuinely ambitious. The meta-commentary of the segment is what makes it linger. Homer is a character who exists in 2 dimensions. That's not just an artistic choice, it's a fundamental aspect of his reality. He's flat, he's drawn, he lives in a world where buildings don't have real depth and people's profiles are their only angle. When he falls into the 3rd dimension, he's not just entering a different space, he's entering a different mode of existence. He's experiencing something that shouldn't be possible for him. And when he crosses into live action, the joke goes even further. Now he's not just in 3 dimensions, he's in our dimensions, our world. The joke is existential. Homer has broken through every barrier between himself and the audience. He's standing on the same ground we stand on. The segment is regularly cited as one of the most inventive Treehouse of Horror segments ever produced. It influenced how the show thought about visual experimentation going forward. It proved that the Treehouse of Horror format could be more than just horror parodies. It could be a laboratory for testing the boundaries of what the show was capable of. There's something quietly unsettling about watching Homer exist in a space that isn't designed for him. The 3D world is empty, cold, mathematical. There's nothing human about it. No warmth, no color, no personality. It's the opposite of Springfield, which for all its dysfunction is a place full of life and character. Homer doesn't belong in the 3rd dimension any more than we would belong in a 2-dimensional drawing. The segment makes you feel that displacement viscerally. And when the space collapses, when the black hole swallows everything, there's a genuine sense of loss, not just for Homer, who might die, but for the space itself. A little pocket of mathematical reality that existed for a few minutes and then was gone. That sense of reality bending, of the show's own rules being broken and rebuilt, was becoming a hallmark of the Treehouse of Horror episodes by the mid-1990s. And the installment that came just 1 year before Homer Cubed might be the greatest Treehouse of Horror of them all. It's the one with the hotel, the one with the time-traveling toaster, and the one where groundskeeper Willie gets an axe in the back 3 separate times. Treehouse of Horror 5, Season 6, Episode 6, aired October 30th, 1994. It holds an IMDb rating of approximately 9.2 out of 10, making it one of the highest-rated episodes in the entire history of the show. It sits alongside episodes like Homer's Enemy, Cape Fear, You Only Move Twice, and Marge vs. the Monorail in that elite tier. 3 segments, each one darker and stranger than the last. Before the episode even begins, Marge appears to warn the audience. She addresses the viewers directly, explaining that this Treehouse of Horror is so scary that it cannot be shown on television. She holds up a letter from Congress that says the episode has been replaced by a movie called 200 Miles to Oregon. The movie starts to play, but Bart's voice cuts in over radio waves, announcing that he's taking control of the broadcast. Homer's voice joins in, playing with the radio frequencies, much to Bart's annoyance. It's a small cold open, but it sets the tone perfectly. This is an episode that knows it's pushing boundaries, and it wants you to know it knows. The first segment is called The Shinning, not The Shining. The Shinning. Groundskeeper Willie explains the name change with a direct address to the audience. Shh, do you want to get sued? The segment is a parody of Stanley Kubrick's 1980 film The Shining, based on Stephen King's novel. The Simpson family becomes the winter caretakers of Mr. Burns' mountain lodge, isolated from the rest of civilization. Mr. Burns, playing the role of the hotel manager, has taken specific steps to ensure Homer goes insane. He's cut off the lodge's cable television and removed all the beer. No TV and no beer make Homer something, Marge says nervously. Go crazy? Homer asks. Don't mind if I do. And then he does. He goes completely berserk, chasing the family through the lodge with an axe in a sequence that recreates specific shots from Kubrick's film with remarkable attention to detail. Bart, in this segment, has the Shinning, a psychic ability that lets him communicate with Groundskeeper Willie, who tells him to use his power to call for help if things go wrong. Things go very wrong. Homer stalks the family through the hedge maze, through the hallways, through the kitchen. Willie rushes to the rescue but gets an axe in the back before he can help. This becomes a running gag through all three segments. Willie dies the same way every time. 3 segments, 3 axes in the back. The writers apparently found this so funny that they committed to it fully, turning a background character's death into a structural joke. The resolution is pure Simpsons. A helicopter arrives and drops a portable television from the sky. It lands in the snow in front of Homer. He sits down and starts watching. His murderous rage evaporates instantly. The television has saved the family. Homer Simpson, even in the grip of homicidal madness, can be neutralized by a screen. The family sits together in the snow watching TV while Homer freezes into a solid block of ice. It's a happy ending, technically. The second segment is called Time and Punishment, and it might be the trippiest thing the show has ever produced within a single segment. Homer's fixing a broken toaster when he accidentally turns it into a time machine. He's transported back to the prehistoric era, millions of years before Springfield exists. He remembers his father's advice: if you ever travel back in time, don't step on anything. Because even the tiniest change could alter the future in unpredictable ways. Homer, of course, immediately steps on things. He swats a mosquito, he sits on a fish, he trips over a dinosaur. Every time he returns to the present, Springfield is completely different. In one version, Ned Flanders has become the supreme overlord of all humanity. Everyone is forced to undergo Flanderization, which takes on a literal meaning here, and lobotomies are the norm. Homer goes back, changes something else, and returns to a present where his family is absurdly wealthy. They live in a mansion, and everything seems perfect. Except donuts don't exist. Homer screams and goes back again. This loop repeats several times. Each return to the present reveals a different version of reality, each one wrong in a different way. The butterfly effect is the underlying principle here, though it's exaggerated to absurd extremes. The segment takes the concept seriously enough to be genuinely unsettling. What if every action you take, no matter how small, completely reshapes the world you return to? What if the version of reality you're living in right now is the result of some prehistoric creature stepping on the wrong bug a million years ago? Eventually, Homer gives up on getting home. He settles for a present that's close enough. Everything looks normal. The family looks right, the house looks right, Springfield looks right. But at dinner, when the family reaches for their food, their tongues extend from their mouths like lizard tongues, long and sticky and inhuman. Homer pauses, considers it, decides it's close enough. The segment ends with the family eating dinner with reptilian tongues as if nothing is wrong. The writer of Time and Punishment was Greg Daniels. This was before Daniels went on to create 2 of the most successful comedies in television history, The Office and King of the Hill. His fingerprints are all over this segment. The tight logical structure, the escalating absurdity, the commitment to a single premise pushed to its furthest extreme. It's a miniature masterpiece of science fiction storytelling compressed into about 7 minutes. The third and final segment is called Nightmare Cafeteria. Principal Skinner decides to solve 2 problems at once. The school has too many detention students and not enough cafeteria food. His solution is exactly what you think it is. He starts feeding the detention students to the rest of the school. Children begin disappearing. One by one, the detention regulars vanish and suspiciously similar-looking menu items appear in the cafeteria. Jimbo is first, then others follow. Bart and Lisa start to notice. They try to warn people, but nobody listens. The segment escalates with genuine tension as the school becomes a slaughterhouse where the adults are the predators and the children are lunch. Lunch Lady Doris participates without apparent moral conflict. Skinner and the faculty discuss recipes. The children who remain grow increasingly terrified. Bart and Lisa try to escape, but find themselves cornered. Willie attempts to save them and, of course, takes an axe in the back. 3 for 3. The pattern is complete. Just when Bart and Lisa are about to be slaughtered, Bart wakes up. It was all a dream. Relief floods through the room. But then, immediately, a mysterious fog rolls through the bedroom window. The fog touches each member of the family and turns them inside out. Their skin inverts. Their organs are on the outside. And instead of screaming, they start dancing. They do a little musical number, inside out, organs flopping, while cheerful music plays. It's simultaneously the grossest and funniest thing the show had done up to that point. Treehouse of Horror 5 works as well as it does because each segment commits fully to its premise. The Shining doesn't half parody The Shining, it recreates specific compositions and then finds the comedy in them. Time and Punishment doesn't just nod at the butterfly effect, it runs the concept through a dozen iterations until the audience is as disoriented as Homer. Nightmare Cafeteria doesn't hint at cannibalism. It puts it front and center and dares you to laugh at it. The episode is also significant because it represents the show at its absolute creative peak. Season 6 is part of what fans and critics often call the Golden Era, roughly spanning seasons 3 through 8. During this period, the show was firing on every cylinder. The writing was dense with jokes, the emotional beats were genuine, the experiments were bold but grounded. Treehouse of Horror 5 is a distillation of everything the show was doing right during this era. It's fearless, funny, disturbing, and inventive in equal measure. What makes it work as a trippy experience specifically is the way it keeps shifting the ground beneath you. The Shining starts as a familiar parody and then becomes something more intense. Time and Punishment starts as a fun, time travel gag and then becomes genuinely disorienting as reality keeps changing. Nightmare Cafeteria starts as dark comedy and then becomes horror, before the dream reveal undoes everything and then the inside-out gag undoes the relief. You're never on stable ground. The episode keeps pulling the rug out, and each time the new reality is weirder than the last. If El Viaje Misterioso is the show's psychedelic masterpiece and Homer Cubed is its existential experiment, Treehouse of Horror 5 is its funhouse mirror. It takes familiar things, a hotel, a toaster, a school cafeteria, and makes them nightmarish, and then it makes the nightmares funny, and then it makes the funny disturbing again. That cycle, that constant oscillation between comfort and unease, is what gives the episode its hypnotic quality. You can't look away because you genuinely don't know what's going to happen next. The show had proven by this point that it could go anywhere. It could put Homer in a Kubrick film, it could make him a time traveler, it could turn children into food, and audiences would follow. The Treehouse of Horror episodes gave the writers a sandbox with no rules, and they used it to build some of the strangest, most memorable things in television animation. But the trippiest episodes of The Simpsons aren't limited to Halloween specials. Some of the show's most surreal moments happened in regular canonical episodes. Episodes that counted, episodes where the weird stuff was real, at least within the logic of the show's universe. And one of the most openly psychedelic of these canonical episodes aired in November of 1998, during the show's 10th season. It's an episode about Homer discovering his mother was a hippie, about a commune that makes organic juice, and about what happens when an entire town starts hallucinating at the same time. The episode is called Doe in the Wind, Season 10, Episode 6. It aired on November 15, 1998, written by Donick Cary and directed by Mark Kirkland and Matthew Nastuck. The showrunner at the time was Mike Scully, who had taken over from Oakley and Weinstein starting with season 9. And this episode features 2 guest stars who bring serious counterculture credentials to the table. Martin Mull plays a character named Seth, and George Carlin plays a character named Munchie. Both are aging hippies who run an organic farm commune. Carlin, of course, was one of the most famous comedians of the 20th century, a man whose entire career was built on challenging authority, questioning social norms, and talking about drugs with a level of openness that got him arrested multiple times. Having him voice a character in The Simpsons' most explicitly drug-adjacent episode was a perfect piece of casting. The episode begins with Homer starring in a worker recruitment commercial for the Springfield nuclear power plant, directed by Mr. Burns. The commercial is terrible. Homer's acting is wooden, and Burns' direction is worse. But the experience gives Homer an unexpected desire. He wants to be an actor. He goes home and starts filling out a Screen Actors Guild application. While doing so, he realizes he doesn't know his own middle name. He's always just written J on forms. What does the J stand for? Lisa helps him investigate. They visit Homer's mother's old farmhouse, a place connected to Mona Simpson, Homer's estranged mother who abandoned the family when Homer was young. At the farmhouse, they find a mural painted on the barn. It's a psychedelic piece of art from the 1960s, full of swirling colors and peace symbols. And written in the mural is Homer's full name, Homer J. Simpson. His middle name is J. Named, presumably, after the counterculture ethos his mother embraced before she disappeared. At the farmhouse, Homer meets Seth and Munchie, his mother's old friends who still live on the property and run it as an organic produce farm. They're genuine relics of the 1960s, long hair, tie-dye, peace signs, the whole thing. They speak in the gentle, spaced-out cadence of people who never quite left Woodstock. Seth, voiced by Martin Mull, is the more articulate of the two. Munchie, voiced by Carlin, is the more far-out one. Together they represent the dream of the 1960s in its twilight years. 2 men who held on to the ideals of their youth even as the world moved on without them. Homer decides he wants to be a hippie. Not in a metaphorical sense. He literally wants to adopt the lifestyle. He grows his hair out. He starts wearing beads and sandals. He talks about peace and love and the interconnectedness of all living things. The family is bewildered. Marge doesn't know what to make of it. Bart and Lisa find it embarrassing. But Homer is committed. At the commune, Homer helps Seth and Munchie with their organic juice business. They make fresh vegetable and fruit juice using produce grown on the farm. The juice is clean, healthy, and totally legal. But Homer, being Homer, accidentally contaminates the batch. He's trying to help, but he doesn't understand the equipment. He adds the wrong ingredients. He doesn't follow the process. And the result is that the juice, which was supposed to be a simple, organic health drink, becomes something else entirely. Something with unexpected properties. Something that induces intense psychedelic hallucinations in anyone who drinks it. The contaminated juice gets distributed across Springfield. People drink it and immediately begin hallucinating. This is the centerpiece of the episode. A montage of Springfield citizens tripping. The animation becomes fluid and strange. Colors bleed into each other. Characters see things that aren't there. The world warps and bends. It's the most openly psychedelic sequence the show had done outside of the chili pepper hallucination. And it's happening to an entire town rather than just one person. The scale of it is what makes it feel different. This isn't Homer alone in a desert, this is everyone. This is collective hallucination. This is Springfield losing its grip on reality all at once. The police quickly trace the contaminated juice back to the farm. Officers arrive to arrest Homer, Seth, and Munchie. Homer, channeling the spirit of 1960s protest, tries to stop them peacefully. He places himself in the officer's path and reminds them of the morals and values of the counterculture era. He places a flower in the barrel of each officer's rifle, recreating one of the most iconic images of Vietnam-era protest photography. It's a genuinely touching moment, played mostly straight, with Homer standing up for something he believes in for once in his life. And then Chief Wiggum fires. The flower lodged in the rifle barrel is driven into Homer's skull by the bullet. Homer ends up hospitalized with a flower embedded in his head. Dr. Hibbert examines him and refuses to remove it, saying he's a doctor and not a gardener. He also refuses to prune the flower's leaves so Homer can watch television. The episode ends with Homer recovering, the commune presumably shut down, and the counterculture dream dead once again. The end credits feature a psychedelic version of The Simpsons' main theme, performed by Yo La Tengo, an American alternative rock band. The performance is slow, droning, and layered with feedback, transforming the familiar Danny Elfman melody into something that sounds like it's being played through a lava lamp. It's a small touch, but it perfectly caps the episode's vibe. The episode also features several iconic 1960s songs throughout, including White Rabbit by Jefferson Airplane, which was released in 1967 and is one of the most famous psychedelic rock songs ever recorded. Incense and Peppermints by Strawberry Alarm Clock, also from 1967, plays during the hallucination sequence. And Time of the Season by the Zombies from 1968 appears as well. The music choices are deliberate and specific. These aren't generic oldies. They're songs that are synonymous with the psychedelic movement. Director Mark Kirkland later said he loved working on this episode. He could relate to the story because he'd grown up in what he described as a sort of hippie, commune school in the late 1960s and early 1970s. He based a lot of the scenery designs on the state of Vermont, where, according to him, a lot of ex-hippies settled after the counterculture era ended. The two hippie characters, Seth and Munchie, were not modeled after specific real people, but their hairstyles were slightly based on those of Jerry Greenfield and Ben Cohen, the founders of Ben and Jerry's Ice Cream. George Carlin's involvement came about through writer Ron Hodge, who specifically wanted Carlin for the role and pushed for it. Scully, the showrunner, described Mull and Carlin as some of the funniest guys that ever lived and said that recording their lines was a lot of fun. Carlin would pass away in 2008, making this one of his relatively few animated voice roles. Critical reception for Doin' in the Wind was mixed. Jake McNeil of Digital Entertainment News called it one of the worst episodes of Season 10, finding the hippie humor dated and saying it felt a quarter century too late. Gary Russell and Gareth Roberts, writing in their Simpsons guide, also reacted negatively, finding the episode hard to watch outside of a few references to 1960s psychedelia and the revelation that Homer's middle name is Jay. But the episode has maintained a loyal fan base over the years, particularly among viewers who appreciate its visual ambition and its willingness to go fully psychedelic in a way the show rarely does. It's not the best episode of the series. It's not trying to be. It's an experiment, a canonical episode that asks what would happen if Springfield dropped acid. And the answer is that the animation gets really, really interesting. The hallucination sequences in Doin' in the Wind and El Viaje Misterioso both deal with individual or collective experiences of altered consciousness. But The Simpsons has explored another form of altered consciousness that's arguably even more disturbing than drug trips or pepper-induced visions. It's the alteration of consciousness through deliberate manipulation, through brainwashing, through cult indoctrination. And the show's most thorough exploration of this happened in Season 9, in an episode that turned the entire town of Springfield into true believers of something called the Movementarians. The Joy of Sect, Season 9, Episode 13. Aired February 8, 1998. Written by Steve O'Donnell, directed by Stephen Dean Moore. This is an episode that takes the concept of cult indoctrination and plays it for comedy while simultaneously taking it seriously enough to be genuinely unsettling. The Simpsons have always been good at this balance. They parody something so thoroughly that the parody becomes a legitimate exploration of the thing being parodied. And in the case of The Joy of Sect, the thing being parodied is the machinery of cults, how they recruit, how they isolate, how they reprogram the human mind, and how incredibly easy it can be to fall for all of it. The episode opens with the Simpson family at the airport, where they encounter recruiters for a group called the Movementarians. The recruiters are polished, friendly, and persistent. They approach Homer and offer him a free weekend at their compound. The Movementarians believe that their leader, always referred to with a capital L, is building a spaceship that will one day take all believers to a paradise planet called Blistonia. The spaceship is being constructed behind the walls of their compound. No one is allowed to see it, but the leader promises it's coming. Just keep working. Just keep believing. Blistonia awaits. Homer initially resists. He's skeptical. He doesn't want to join anything. He has beer at home and a television and a couch, and those three things satisfy every need he's ever had. But the Movementarians have a secret weapon. During the recruitment session, they play the Batman theme song, the 1966 one, Na 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 Batman, and Homer is hooked. The Batman theme is what breaks his resistance. It's such a perfect Simpsons joke because it captures something true about how easily the human mind can be manipulated by something as simple as a catchy melody. Homer doesn't join the cult because he's convinced by their theology. He joins because they played a song he likes during the pitch. Once Homer is in, the rest of the family follows. They move to the compound, they wear matching robes, they pick beans in the fields, they attend sessions where the leader speaks to them through a giant video screen. The compound looks like a blend of every famous cult compound in American history. There are echoes of Jonestown, the compound in Guyana where over 900 members of the People's Temple died in 1978. There are elements of the Heaven's Gate group whose members committed mass suicide in 1997, just 1 year before this episode aired. There are nods to the Rajneesh movement in Oregon, where followers of Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh built an entire city in the desert. And there are references to Scientology, particularly in the way the Movementarians use step-by-step psychological techniques to isolate new members from their families and previous lives. The writers did their homework on this one. The episode treats cult psychology with a specificity that goes beyond simple parody. The indoctrination techniques shown on screen, the isolation from outside information, the love bombing of new recruits, the gradual escalation of demands, the demonization of anyone who questions the group. These are all real techniques documented by cult researchers and former members. The show wraps them in comedy, but the framework underneath is accurate enough that religious scholars have analyzed this episode as one of the most culturally significant Simpsons episodes ever produced. Not everyone in Springfield falls for it, at least not at first. Marge is skeptical from the beginning. She sees through the manipulation faster than anyone else. Reverend Lovejoy loses his congregation to the Movementarians and tries to win them back. Mr. Burns, offended that someone else has managed to brainwash the town's workforce before he could, attempts to start his own rival cult. Burns's scenes are some of the funniest in the episode. He can't understand why the leader is more beloved than he is. He offers his workers everything he thinks a good cult leader should offer, but he doesn't have the charisma or the mystery. He's just a rich old man who wants to be loved. The surreal quality of the episode comes from watching an entire town collectively abandon reason. Springfield is never a particularly rational place, but there's usually an underlying logic to its dysfunction. People are selfish, or stupid, or greedy, but they're recognizably human. In The Joy of Sect, that humanity gets stripped away. The townspeople become blank-eyed, smiling, obedient drones. They chant, they work the fields, they report each other for thought crimes. The transformation is gradual enough that it feels plausible and sudden enough that it feels dreamlike. Marge eventually orchestrates the family's escape from the compound. The deprogramming process involves exposing the family to everything the Movementarians had taken away from them. Television, junk food, Bart's skateboard, Lisa's saxophone, the familiar comforts of their dysfunctional life. It works. The cult's hold breaks. The family returns to normal. The climax involves the townspeople confronting the leader and demanding to see the spaceship he's been supposedly building behind the compound walls. The doors open. There's no spaceship. There's just a crude wooden frame with a banner that says Blistonia or Bust. The leader, exposed as a fraud, escapes in a helicopter. The helicopter is notably luxurious. The leader has been living in comfort while his followers pick beans in the dirt. What makes The Joy of Sect work as a trippy episode isn't psychedelic animation or hallucination sequences, it's the trippiness of watching familiar characters lose themselves. Homer Simpson, for all his flaws, has a core identity. He loves beer, he loves donuts, he loves his family in his own sloppy way. Watching that identity get erased and replaced with cult programming is disturbing in a way that's different from watching him hallucinate. Hallucinations end, they wear off. But the cult changes who Homer is at a fundamental level. It rewrites his values, his desires, his sense of self. That's a deeper kind of reality distortion than any pepper-induced vision could ever achieve. The episode also works because it's about something real. Cults aren't fiction. The organizations the writers drew from, Jonestown, Heaven's Gate, the Rajneesh movement. These were real groups with real followers who genuinely believed in what they were doing. People died in those groups. People lost decades of their lives. The Joy of Sect treats this reality with enough respect that the comedy never feels cruel, but with enough irreverence that it never feels preachy. In the landscape of Simpsons trippiness, the Joy of Sect represents a category unto itself. It's not visual trippiness, it's psychological trippiness. The distortion isn't in the animation, it's in the characters. It's watching people you know become people you don't recognize. And it's realizing how easy it would be for that to happen to anyone, even you, even someone as stubbornly Homer-ish as Homer. After the cult, after the hippie commune, after the hallucinations and the third dimension and the time-traveling toaster, the show found yet another way to distort reality. This time it wasn't through drugs or cults or supernatural phenomena. It was through something much more intimate. Memory, the question of whether you can trust your own mind to tell you the truth about what happened to you last night, or last year, or ever. Eternal Moonshine of the Simpson Mind, Season 19, Episode 9. Aired December 16, 2007. This episode won the 2008 Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Animated Program, one of the show's 37 Emmy wins out of what's been estimated at somewhere around 102 total nominations over the show's run. The exact nomination count varies slightly across different sources, but the win for this episode is confirmed. In its original American broadcast, the episode was viewed by approximately 10.15 million households and won its time slot. It was widely recognized as the best episode of Season 19. The title is a reference to Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, the 2004 film directed by Michel Gondry and written by Charlie Kaufman. That film tells the story of a man who undergoes a medical procedure to erase his memories of a failed relationship, only to realize during the process that he doesn't want to forget. It's a film about the unreliability of memory, the pain of loss, and the question of whether forgetting is ever really a solution to heartbreak. The Simpsons episode takes the core idea, the unreliability of memory, and applies it to Homer's world. The moonshine in the title refers to alcohol, collapsing Kaufman's high-concept science fiction with Homer's drinking problem into a single pun. Homer wakes up lying in the snow outside his house. He has no memory of how he got there. He has no memory of the previous night. His last clear memory is from hours earlier, and everything between then and now is a blank. He goes inside and finds the house empty. Marge is gone. The kids are gone. There are signs of something bad having happened, but Homer can't piece together what. The rest of the episode unfolds as Homer tries to reconstruct his memories. He visits people who saw him the night before. He checks security camera footage. He revisits locations. Each piece of information triggers a fragmented flashback, a brief, distorted memory that reveals part of the picture, but not all of it. Some of these memories are genuine. Some, it turns out, are false, constructed by Homer's guilty subconscious to fill in blanks that his blackout created. The structure is deliberately disorienting. The episode moves back and forth in time without clear markers. Memories overlap and contradict each other. Homer isn't a reliable narrator because he literally cannot remember what happened, and the audience is trapped inside his perspective. We only know what Homer knows. When his memories are wrong, we're wrong too. When he discovers a piece of the truth, we discover it with him. The visual signature of the episode is a sequence where Homer's entire life flashes before his eyes. 39 years of Homer Simpson's life presented as a rapid montage. The sequence is a direct parody of Noah Kalina's viral video, Every Day, in which Kalina photographed himself every day for 6 years and compiled the photos into a time-lapse set to a simple piano score. The Simpsons recreation uses the same type of piano music and the same time-lapse format, but instead of photographs, it shows Homer aging from infancy to his present age in a matter of seconds. Each frame is slightly different. Homer's face changes, his expression shifts, his hair grows and recedes. The effect is simultaneously funny and melancholy. It captures the terrifying speed at which a life passes. 1 minute you're a baby, then you blink, and you're Homer. The emotional core of the episode is Homer's growing fear that he did something terrible to Marge during his blackout. The fragmented memories suggest conflict. They suggest anger. They suggest something violent or cruel. Homer is terrified of what he might have done. The dread builds throughout the episode because we, like Homer, don't know the truth. We're assembling the puzzle alongside him, and every new piece makes the picture darker. The resolution, when it comes, recontextualizes everything. The truth about what happened the previous night is not what Homer feared. The memories that suggested violence or cruelty were distorted by guilt and alcohol. The real story is more complicated and more human than the worst-case scenario Homer had been imagining. Without spoiling the specific reveal, the episode earns its emotional ending by making the audience share Homer's relief. We were afraid of the same thing he was afraid of. And when the truth turns out to be different, the relief feels earned because the dread was real. What makes Eternal Moonshine of the Simpson Mind a trippy episode is its relationship with reality itself. This isn't a hallucination episode. Homer isn't on drugs. He's not in another dimension. He's in his own mind, trying to navigate a landscape of broken memories, false impressions, and genuine blackouts. The distortion is internal. The unreliable reality isn't out there in the world. It's inside Homer's head. And that's arguably more unsettling than any pepper-induced desert vision or CGI void. Because at least when you're hallucinating, you know something external caused it. You know the peppers did it, you know the portal did it. But when your own memory is lying to you, who do you blame? What do you trust? If you can't trust the story your brain tells you about your own life, what can you trust? The episode proved that the show, even in its 19th season, which is deep into what most fans consider the post-Golden era, could still produce something genuinely inventive and emotionally powerful. The Emmy win wasn't charity. It was recognition that this particular episode did something special. It took a concept that could have been a gimmick, a non-linear Memento-style memory puzzle, and turned it into something that actually moved people. The trippy structure served the emotional story rather than the other way around. The fragmented memories weren't just a fun narrative trick. They were the engine of Homer's fear and the audience's empathy. By 2007, the show had been on the air for 18 years. It had explored hallucinations, alternate dimensions, time travel, cult psychology, and psychedelic communes. But Eternal Moonshine found a new frontier. The trippiest landscape of all turned out to be the inside of Homer Simpson's own unreliable, alcohol-damaged, deeply frightened mind. After exploring the interior of Homer's memory, the show would go on to experiment with the very fabric of its own visual identity. If Eternal Moonshine asks what happens when you can't trust your own brain, the next episode on our journey asks an even stranger question. What happens when you can't trust the world you're living in? What happens when you realize that reality itself is made of plastic bricks and someone built it that way on purpose? Brick Like Me, Season 25, Episode 20, aired May 4th, 2014. This is the Lego episode, and calling it that doesn't quite capture how strange and ambitious it actually is. A lot of shows have done novelty episodes where the animation changes. South Park did a World of Warcraft episode. Family Guy did a Star Wars trilogy. But Brick Like Me does something those episodes didn't. It doesn't just change the visual style for laughs. It uses the visual change as the foundation of an emotional story that's genuinely moving. The Lego world isn't a gimmick, it's a metaphor. And the metaphor is about something that every parent fears and every child eventually outgrows. The episode opens with Homer waking up in Springfield. Everything seems normal for about 2 seconds. Then the camera pulls back and we see that everything and everyone is made of Lego bricks. The buildings are Lego buildings, the cars are Lego cars, the characters are Lego minifigures. Homer is a yellow Lego figure with his signature white shirt and blue pants, rendered in the chunky, geometric style of actual Lego animation. The visual change is total. This isn't a cutaway gag or a brief fantasy sequence. The entire episode looks like this: 22 minutes of Lego Springfield. The animation was created in collaboration with Lego and the studio that produced the Lego Movie, which had been released just 3 months earlier in February 2014. The Lego Movie was a massive commercial and critical success, grossing nearly $500 million worldwide and proving that Lego-based animation could sustain a feature-length story. The Simpsons episode rides the wave of that success, but it also does something the movie didn't. It asks what it means to live in a Lego world, not just what it looks like, what it means. Homer's the only character who senses something is wrong. He starts having flashes. Brief, disorienting moments where the familiar hand-drawn Simpsons animation style bleeds through the Lego world. For a fraction of a second, Homer sees regular Springfield, regular Marge, regular Lisa. Then the vision fades and he's back in Lego land. These flashes are unsettling because they suggest that the Lego world isn't real, that there's another reality underneath it, that Homer is living in a constructed world, literally built brick by brick, and he's the only one who can see the cracks. As the episode progresses, Homer starts to investigate. He follows the flashes, he tries to understand what they mean. And gradually, the truth emerges. The Lego world is Homer's creation. Not physically, psychologically. Homer built this world in his mind as a way of coping with something he couldn't face in the real world. And that something is Lisa growing up. Lisa in the real world is starting to change. She's getting older, she's becoming interested in things that don't include her father. She's pulling away, slowly, naturally, the way all children do. And Homer can't handle it. He can't face the idea that his little girl won't always be his little girl. So his mind built a world where that can't happen. A world made of Lego, where nobody ages, nobody changes, nobody gets hurt. Nothing breaks permanently because you can always rebuild it. Lego Springfield is a preservation fantasy. It's Homer's attempt to freeze time, to keep Lisa exactly as she is right now, small enough to need him, young enough to think he's wonderful. The emotional weight of this revelation is significant. The Simpsons has always been at its core a show about family. And the Homer-Lisa relationship is one of the most nuanced in the series. Homer is stupid, selfish, and often a terrible father. But he loves Lisa with a depth that occasionally breaks through his incompetence. Lisa is brilliant, sensitive, and often frustrated by her father's limitations. But she loves him with a loyalty that survives every disappointment. The Lego episode puts this relationship at its center and asks the question that every parent will eventually face. Can you let go? Homer's choice is framed explicitly. He can stay in the Lego world, stay in the safe, perfect, unchanging reality he built for himself. A world where Lisa is always 8, always playing with Lego, always his. Or he can return to the real world, the messy, imperfect, hand-drawn world where Lisa will grow up, move away, become someone he doesn't fully understand, and eventually leave him behind. He chooses the real world. Of course he does, because as much as Homer wants to stop time, he loves Lisa enough to let her change. He loves her enough to accept that the Lisa of tomorrow might not need him the way the Lisa of today does. And he loves her enough to know that keeping her frozen in a Lego world, even a beautiful one, would be a kind of cruelty disguised as love. The visual transition from Lego Springfield back to regular Springfield is handled with surprising grace. The bricks don't just disappear, they dissolve. They melt away gradually, revealing the hand-drawn world underneath. The colors shift, the geometry softens. The rigid right angles of the Lego world give way to the flowing, organic lines of traditional Simpsons animation. It's not dramatic, it's gentle. Like waking up from a dream that you didn't want to end but knew you couldn't stay in. The episode works as a trippy experience because it takes the most familiar visual environment in television animation, a show that's looked essentially the same for 25 years, and makes it unrecognizable. For 22 minutes, The Simpsons doesn't look like The Simpsons. The characters you've known for decades are rendered as plastic figures. Their world is made of interlocking bricks. And the strangeness of that isn't just visual, it's conceptual. You're watching a show that has always been a certain thing, and suddenly it's a different thing. The dissonance between what you expect and what you see creates a low-level cognitive unease that persists throughout the episode. Something is wrong. You can't quite name it, but you feel it. And that feeling is exactly what Homer feels. The Lego world is beautiful and safe and wrong. And you can tell it's wrong because it's too perfect. Nothing in The Simpsons should be perfect. Brick Like Me also raises interesting questions about the nature of animated reality. In a show that's drawn by hand, or at least designed to look like it is, what does it mean when the drawing style changes? In live-action television, the actors stay the same no matter how weird the plot gets. Bryan Cranston still looks like Bryan Cranston whether he's cooking meth or winning an Emmy. But in animation, the visual style is part of the reality. When you change the style, you change the world. Homer in Lego isn't the same Homer as Homer in traditional animation, even though they have the same voice and the same personality. The physical form of the character is inseparable from the world he inhabits. Put him in Lego, and he becomes, on some fundamental level, a different person, a simpler person, a person who can't age, can't change, can't grow, which is exactly what Homer wanted, and exactly what he had to give up. If Brick Like Me is about a father who can't face the future, the next episode we're going to explore is about a man who can't face the past, specifically his own past. The entire history of his own intelligence, his own personality, his own identity, all of it explained by a single object lodged in the most important organ in his body, a crayon in his brain, put there by accident when he was a child, explaining everything about Homer Simpson that has ever confused, frustrated, or delighted anyone who's watched the show. Homer Season 12, Episode 9. Aired January 7th, 2001. Written by Al Jean, who by this point was one of the most important figures in the show's history. Jean had been with The Simpsons since the beginning. He was a writer and showrunner during the Golden Era and would eventually become the longest-serving showrunner in the show's history, guiding it through many of its modern seasons. Directed by Mike B. Anderson. The title is a play on Homer's name, written as H-O-M-R with a long O, referencing the common abbreviation style of scientific or medical terminology. It's an episode about intelligence, identity, and the terrible question of whether you'd rather be smart and miserable or stupid and happy. The episode begins with the Simpson family visiting an animation convention. Homer goofs around. Lisa tries to engage with the exhibits. Bart causes trouble. Nothing unusual, but Homer invests the family's savings in a startup he discovers at the convention, and the company promptly declares bankruptcy. To earn the money back, Homer sells his body as a test subject for scientific experiments. During one of the experiments, doctors perform an X-ray scan of his head, and the X-ray reveals something that nobody expected. There's a foreign object lodged in Homer's brain, a small cylindrical object wedged deep in his frontal lobe. It's a crayon. A flashback reveals the origin. When Homer was a child, he shoved a crayon up his nose, as children sometimes do. But instead of coming back out, the crayon went further in. It traveled through his nasal cavity and lodged itself in his brain, specifically in the region responsible for higher cognitive function. It's been there ever since. Homer's entire adult life, every job he's failed at, every decision he's botched, every word he's mispronounced, every obvious fact he's missed, all of it has been caused by a crayon pressing against his brain and suppressing his intelligence. Think about what this means for the show. The Simpsons had been on the air for 12 seasons by this point. 12 years of Homer being stupid. 12 years of Homer failing at things that any reasonably intelligent person could manage. And now the show is telling us that all of it, every moment of it, was the result of a physical injury. Homer isn't naturally stupid. He was made stupid by an accident. Under different circumstances, with the crayon removed, Homer could have been a completely different person. The crayon is removed. A surgeon extracts it, and Homer's intelligence begins to increase almost immediately. His IQ climbs. He starts speaking in complete, articulate sentences. He uses vocabulary he's never used before. He starts reading. He starts thinking critically. He starts noticing things about the world that he's been oblivious to for decades. The transformation is gradual and beautifully written. Homer doesn't become a genius overnight. He becomes a normal, reasonably intelligent adult. And the show takes its time showing what that means. He can follow conversations, he can understand Lisa's homework, he can read a book and remember what it said. These aren't superpowers, they're baseline human competencies. But for Homer, they're revelations. He's experiencing what it's like to have a functioning brain for the first time in his adult life. The relationship between Homer and Lisa is the emotional engine of the episode. For the first time, they connect intellectually. Lisa finally has a parent who understands what she's talking about. They discuss philosophy. They share ideas. They have conversations that go beyond Lisa explaining something and Homer nodding blankly. Lisa is overjoyed. She's been waiting her whole life for someone in her family to meet her on her level. And now her father, of all people, is there. But intelligence comes with costs. Smart Homer sees things that stupid Homer couldn't. He notices that his marriage is strained. He realizes that his friends at the bar are vapid. He understands that his job at the nuclear power plant is dangerous, not just to him, but to the entire town. He writes a detailed report proving that the plant is unsafe, documenting specific violations and hazards. The report threatens to shut the plant down. Mr. Burns is furious. Homer also becomes isolated. Lenny and Carl avoid him because he's no longer fun to be around. Marge finds him intimidating. Barney doesn't know what to talk about with him. The people in Homer's life liked him when he was stupid because stupid Homer was non-threatening, easy to be around, and amusing in his incompetence. Smart Homer is none of those things. Smart Homer is challenging, observant, and honest. Smart Homer makes people uncomfortable by seeing them clearly. This is the central tragedy of the episode. Intelligence doesn't make Homer happy, it makes him aware. And awareness, in a world as dysfunctional as Springfield, is a curse. Stupid Homer floated through life on a cloud of obliviousness, never noticing the problems around him, never feeling the weight of things he couldn't change. Smart Homer sees everything, every crack in his marriage, every hazard at his job, every intellectual limitation of his friends, every way in which his life has been smaller and sadder than it needed to be. Knowledge is painful. Ignorance, it turns out, really was bliss. Homer makes his choice. He goes to Moe's bar and asks Moe to shove the crayon back in. Moe, who is many things but never surprised by anything Homer asks, obliges. The crayon goes back in. Homer's intelligence drops. His vocabulary shrinks. His awareness fades. The world becomes simple and warm and comfortable again. He goes home and he's Homer again. Regular Homer, stupid Homer, happy Homer. But before the procedure, Homer writes a letter to Lisa. He knows that when the crayon goes back in, he won't remember being smart. He won't remember their conversations. He won't remember the connection they shared, so he writes it down. The letter tells Lisa that he's sorry he can't be the father she deserves, that he knows she's special, that he loves her even though he can't understand her. The letter is the last thing smart Homer ever produces, and it's addressed to the one person who made being smart worth something. Lisa finds the letter later. She reads it alone. The episode ends on this quiet, devastating note. A daughter reading a letter from a version of her father that no longer exists. A version who understood her, who spoke her language, who loved her in a way that the current version is too limited to express. It's one of the most emotionally powerful moments in the entire history of the show. What makes HOMR a trippy episode isn't visual spectacle. There are no hallucination sequences, no altered animation styles, no portals to other dimensions. The trippiness is entirely conceptual. It's the idea that your entire identity, your personality, your intelligence, your experience of reality can be determined by a physical object the size of a crayon. That who you are is a product of brain chemistry and anatomy, and that if you change the hardware, you change the person. Homer with the crayon is one person. Homer without it is a completely different person. Same body, same face, same family, different man. That's a thought experiment about consciousness that belongs in a philosophy seminar, not a sitcom. And the show pulls it off. The deeper implication is one that the episode doesn't state explicitly, but that any thoughtful viewer will arrive at on their own. If Homer has been brain damaged his entire adult life, then every single episode of The Simpsons is, in a sense, the story of a brain-damaged man navigating a world he can barely comprehend. Every failure, every mispronunciation, every dough, all of it is the result of a crayon in his brain. The show has always treated Homer's stupidity as a character trait. HOMR reframes it as a medical condition. And once you see it that way, you can never quite go back to seeing it the old way. That's trippy, that's reality altering, not because the animation changed or because someone ate a weird pepper, but because a piece of information changed how you understand something you've been watching for years. And that's what the best trippy episodes of The Simpsons do. They don't just show you something strange, they change how you see something familiar. Speaking of seeing the familiar through unfamiliar eyes, the show has one more category of trippy episodes that we haven't explored yet. Episodes that take the mundane world of Springfield and inject it with something from outside. Something that doesn't belong, something that forces the characters to confront the possibility that the universe is bigger, stranger, and more terrifying than anything they've encountered in their ordinary yellow sky lives. Aliens, government conspiracies, things that glow in the woods at night. The Springfield Files, Season 8, Episode 10. Aired January 12th, 1997, written by Reed Harrison, directed by Stephen Dean Moore. This episode sits in the heart of Season 8, which the project fact sheet describes as the season of high-concept experiments. This is the same season that gave us El Viaje Misterioso with the chili pepper hallucination and the space coyote. The same season that produced You Only Move Twice with the beloved villain Hank Scorpio, voiced by Albert Brooks. The same season that deconstructed the show's own premise with Homer's enemy, the Frank Grimes episode that holds a 9.3 on IMDb and is the highest rated episode in the entire series. Season 8 was a creative supernova, and the Springfield Files is one of its most playful experiments, a full crossover with the X-Files that treats Homer's world like a legitimate paranormal investigation. The episode is presented by Leonard Nimoy. Nimoy, of course, is famous for playing Spock in Star Trek, but here he's parodying his role as the host of In Search Of, a 1970s and 1980s television series that explored unexplained phenomena, UFOs, and mysteries. Nimoy narrates the episode in his calm, authoritative voice, lending an air of fake seriousness to everything that happens. His presence frames the entire episode as a documentary about something strange that happened in a small American town. The effect is immediate. You're not watching a sitcom anymore, you're watching an investigation. The story begins on a Friday night. Homer is at Moe's Tavern drinking. This is not unusual. What's unusual is what happens on his walk home. Homer takes a shortcut through the woods. The forest is dark, the trees are dense, and then he sees it, a glowing figure, standing in the trees, thin, luminous, alien. It speaks to Homer. "I bring you love," it says in a high, eerie voice. Homer screams and runs. Nobody believes him. Marge thinks he was drunk. His friends laugh at him. Even Bart is skeptical, and Bart believes in almost everything. Homer is frustrated. He knows what he saw. It was real. It was right there in front of him. But the combination of his reputation as a drunk and the absurdity of the claim makes it impossible for anyone to take him seriously. This is where the X-Files crossover kicks in. FBI agents. Fox Mulder and Dana Scully arrive in Springfield to investigate Homer's claim. David Duchovny voices Mulder. Gillian Anderson voices Scully. They play their characters exactly as they do on The X-Files, which was one of the biggest shows on television in 1997. Mulder is the believer, eager to find evidence of extraterrestrial life. Scully is the skeptic, looking for rational explanations. Their dynamic translates perfectly to the Simpsons universe because Springfield is exactly the kind of town where something like this would happen. Mulder and Scully interview Homer. They investigate the woods. They search for physical evidence. Meanwhile, Homer becomes obsessed with proving that what he saw was real. He drags Bart back to the woods on subsequent nights, hoping the alien will return. And it does. The glowing figure appears again. This time, other people see it too. Springfield erupts with alien fever. The town divides into believers and skeptics. Vendors sell alien merchandise. The media descends. The atmosphere of the episode is genuinely eerie. The scenes in the woods are animated with unusual care. The lighting is darker than typical Simpsons episodes. The shadows are deeper. The color palette shifts toward blues and greens, giving the forest a cold, unwelcoming feel. The glowing figure, when it appears, is drawn with a softness that makes it look out of place in the sharp-lined world of the show. It doesn't belong here. Its visual language is wrong for this universe, and that wrongness creates real tension. The resolution is one of the great reveals in Simpsons history. The alien isn't an alien, it's Mr. Burns. Charles Montgomery Burns, Homer's elderly, skeletal, impossibly thin employer, has been undergoing weekly medical treatments that involve a cocktail of drugs and procedures. The treatments cause his skin to glow green and give him a euphoric, almost spiritual demeanor. He wanders through the woods each week after his treatment, dazed and luminous, murmuring about love and peace. The townspeople, upon seeing Burns in his glowing state, nearly beat him to death with sticks. He's saved only when someone points out that he's a human being, not an alien. The joke works on multiple levels. Burns is so old, so frail, so physically bizarre that he's essentially alien already. The idea that an actual alien visiting Springfield would turn out to be the town's richest and most powerful man is a perfect inversion of the paranormal investigation genre. The truth isn't out there. The truth is that your boss is on weird medication. The X-Files crossover is notable because it treats the Simpsons world with the same seriousness that the X-Files treats its own. Mulder and Scully don't act like they're in a cartoon. They act like they're on their show, investigating a case. The comedy comes from the collision of their seriousness with Homer's world, not from mocking either show. It's respectful parody, and it works because both shows were at the peak of their cultural relevance in 1997. The episode also features a memorable subplot, where Homer takes a lie detector test to prove he's telling the truth about the alien. The machine works perfectly, but Homer's answers are so consistently wrong about basic facts that the machine explodes. The implication is that Homer lies so frequently and so casually that even a machine can't handle the volume. The Springfield Files represents the show's most successful attempt to merge genres. It's a sitcom episode and a paranormal investigation simultaneously. The tone shifts between comedy and genuine suspense in ways that shouldn't work but do. When Homer is alone in the woods at night, waiting for the alien to return, the audience feels real tension. Not because we think aliens are real in the Simpsons universe, although technically Kang and Kodos do exist in the Treehouse of Horror episodes, but because the direction and animation sell the atmosphere so effectively. And that's an important distinction. Kang and Kodos, the tentacled aliens who have appeared in nearly every Treehouse of Horror since the first one in 1990, exist in the non-canon Halloween specials. They're jokes. They're recurring gag characters who show up once a year to threaten Earth and deliver one-liners. The Springfield Files is different because it takes the idea of alien contact and plays it in the regular, canonical world of the show. The stakes feel different. The rules are different. When Homer sees something in the woods, it's not a Treehouse of Horror gag. It's something that actually happened to him in the continuity of the series. This blurring of the line between the supernatural Treehouse episodes and the mundane regular episodes is part of what makes The Simpsons' Trippiest episodes so effective. The show has two operating modes. In one mode, anything goes. People die, dimensions cross, monsters appear, and none of it carries over to the next episode. In the other mode, the world runs on something resembling normal logic. Jobs matter, relationships evolve, actions have consequences. When the trippy stuff happens in the normal mode, it carries more weight because it's happening in a world that's supposed to make sense. And with that in mind, let's return to the Treehouse of Horror episodes one more time. We covered Treehouse of Horror 5 and 6 earlier, but the tradition spans 36 installments across the show's history, and several of the segments we haven't discussed yet are among the most surreal things the show has ever produced. Let's walk through a few more of these segments, not in chronological order, but in order of increasing strangeness. Treehouse of Horror 7, Season 8, Episode 1, aired October 27, 1996. The second segment of this episode is called The Genesis Tub, and it's one of the most quietly trippy segments the show ever produced. Lisa, for a school science project, places one of her baby teeth in a petri dish with cola to see what happens. What happens is that a tiny civilization develops on the tooth. Microscopic organisms evolve. They build cities, they develop technology, they create art and culture and religion. Lisa is their god. She watches them through a magnifying glass as they go from single-celled organisms to a thriving metropolis in a matter of hours. Bart, being Bart, interferes. He flicks the petri dish. He blows on the tiny city. To the microscopic inhabitants, these are apocalyptic events, natural disasters caused by an indifferent or malicious higher power. The segment plays with the idea of scale, with the question of whether we might be someone else's science project, observed through a magnifying glass by a being so enormous that we can't even perceive it. Lisa eventually gets shrunk down to the size of the micro-civilization and enters their world. She discovers that they worship her. They've built temples in her honor. They've studied the tooth she placed in the dish and concluded that it's a sacred relic from their creator. Lisa is simultaneously their god and their prisoner because once she enters their scale, she can't get back to her own. Bart, up in the regular-sized world, simply submits Lisa's science project as his own and wins. The micro-civilization Lisa included becomes Bart's homework. The Genesis Tub is trippy because it asks one of the oldest questions in philosophy and religion. Are we alone in the universe? Is there something bigger than us watching? And if there is, does it care? Lisa cares about her civilization, but she can't protect it from Bart any more than a god could protect its creation from forces it didn't design. The segment treats this enormous question with the lightness the show is known for, but the underlying idea is genuinely mind-bending. Every time you look at a petri dish, a puddle, a grain of sand, you're potentially looking at a world. You just can't see it. Treehouse of Horror 17, Season 18, Episode 4, aired November 5th, 2006. The first segment of this episode is called Married to the Blob, a parody of the 1958 horror film The Blob. Homer and Marge are outside on a hammock when a meteorite falls nearby. It cracks open and reveals a glowing green substance that looks like a melted marshmallow. Despite his family's objections, Homer puts the goo on a stick and eats it. The goo tries to escape multiple times. It's clearly alive. Homer eats it anyway. During the night, the substance fuses with Homer's body and begins controlling him. His hunger becomes insatiable. He eats everything in the house. He almost eats Bart before Marge catches him, although it turns out he's only eaten the cat, Snowball V. Homer transforms into a giant blob creature and roams Springfield, consuming people. He develops a specific taste for fat people, which leads to a musical sequence that parodies Sir Mix-a-Lot's Baby Got Back. The parody is called Baby Likes Fat, and it features Homer, now a massive, sticky creature, hunting down overweight citizens at their favorite restaurants and gathering spots. Dr. Phil McGraw appears with the Simpson family and gives Homer a stern lecture about his murderous eating habits, demanding he stop for the sake of his family. The scene parodies Dr. Phil's television persona perfectly, with his no-nonsense Texas drawl and confrontational style applied to the absurd situation of a man who has become a cannibalistic blob. What makes this segment trippy is the body horror. Homer doesn't just gain weight or eat a lot. He physically transforms. He loses his human shape. He becomes something liquid, something that absorbs other people into itself. The segment treats this transformation with enough visual detail that it's genuinely unsettling, even as the jokes keep coming. Homer's face stretches and distorts as he swallows people whole. His body mass increases until he's the size of a building. The animation team clearly had fun with the fluidity of the blob, creating a Homer who drips, sloshes, and oozes through Springfield in ways that the normally rigid character design would never allow. Treehouse of Horror 11. Season 12, Episode 1, aired November 1st, 2000. The third segment is called Night of the Dolphin, and it's exactly what it sounds like. Dolphins take over the world. The premise begins when Lisa, visiting a marine park, frees a captive dolphin named Snorky. Snorky returns to the ocean and rallies the other dolphins. They're tired of being pushed around by humans. They're tired of being kept in tanks and made to perform tricks. They want revenge. And they're organized. The dolphins emerge from the ocean and begin their assault on Springfield. They walk on land, standing upright on their tail fins. They attack humans with military precision. They have a leader, a strategy, and zero mercy. The residents of Springfield are overwhelmed. The police can't stop them. The military is nowhere to be found. The dolphins push the entire human population out of Springfield and claim the land for themselves. The humans are forced to live in the sea. The episode ends with the citizens of Springfield floating in the ocean, trying to adapt to aquatic life, while the dolphins enjoy houses, cars, and television. It's a complete role reversal. The joke is that the dolphins are better at civilization than the humans ever were. Night of the Dolphin is surreal because it takes something benign dolphins and turns them into an existential threat. Dolphins are almost universally beloved by humans. They're seen as friendly, intelligent, and harmless. The segment asks what would happen if that friendliness was a cover. What if dolphins are actually resentful? What if they've been keeping track of every indignity humans have inflicted on them and they're just waiting for the right moment to strike? The idea is funny, but the execution is surprisingly effective. The scenes of dolphins walking on land, their wet bodies glistening under Springfield streetlights, are genuinely eerie. Treehouse of Horror 22. Season 23, Episode 3. Aired October 30th, 2011. The second segment is called Dial D for Diddley, and it's a parody of the Showtime series Dexter. Ned Flanders, Springfield's most devout Christian, hears the voice of God speaking to him through his family Bible. God tells Ned to kill sinners. Ned, who has spent his entire life trying to be a good person, obeys. He becomes a serial killer, targeting people who have violated God's commandments. The segment opens with Ned driving through a gritty area of Springfield, giving an internal monologue in the style of Dexter's opening narration. He encounters a prostitute and tells her to spend less time on her back and more time on her knees, meaning prayer. She takes his advice and enrolls in what the episode calls the Yale School of Prostitution. Then Ned witnesses Mr. Burns dumping toxic waste in a lake. God's voice tells him to slay Burns and urinate in his ashes. Ned is hesitant but obeys. He decapitates Burns, dismembers the body, and throws the head into the irradiated lake where it grows a third eye. Ned continues his killing spree, becoming more efficient and more conflicted with each murder. The dark comedy comes from the collision between Ned's fundamental goodness and the horrible acts he's committing. Ned doesn't enjoy killing. He does it because he believes God is commanding him to do it. The segment asks whether blind obedience to divine authority is virtuous or monstrous. If God tells you to kill, is it murder or is it righteous judgment? Ned never questions the voice. He never considers the possibility that it might not be God. He just does what he's told because that's who Ned Flanders is. Obedient, faithful, a good neighbor who happens to be cutting people into pieces because the Bible told him to. The resolution reveals that the voice Ned was hearing wasn't God at all. It was Homer, using a walkie-talkie to impersonate God and trick Ned into eliminating people Homer didn't like. The revelation is both funny and horrifying. Homer manipulated the most devout man in Springfield into becoming a murderer by exploiting his unquestioning faith. The segment ends with Ned realizing he's been used, but the damage is done. People are dead. Ned's hands are literally bloody. And Homer's only concern is whether Ned will kill one more person for him. Dial D for Diddley is trippy, not because of visual effects or alternate dimensions, but because it takes the most morally upright character in the show's universe and turns him into a serial killer. Ned Flanders is supposed to be the good guy. He's supposed to be the contrast to Homer's moral bankruptcy. Seeing him splattered in blood, murmuring prayers as he dismembers bodies, is deeply disorienting. It violates the fundamental character contract that the show has maintained for decades. And that violation, that seeing someone you know become someone you don't, is its own kind of trip. Treehouse of Horror 26, Season 27, Episode 5, aired October 25th, 2015. The first segment is called Wanted Dead Then Alive. Sideshow Bob finally kills Bart. After decades of trying, across multiple episodes spanning the entire run of the show, Bob succeeds. He murders Bart Simpson. And then the segment asks a question that nobody ever thought to ask. What does Sideshow Bob do with himself once Bart is dead? The answer is that Bob has no idea. His entire identity was built around the pursuit of Bart's destruction. Without Bart, Bob is empty. He has no purpose. He doesn't know who he is. He tries to move on. He gets a job teaching at a university. He reads poetry. He attempts to live a normal, cultured life, the life he always said he wanted. But it doesn't satisfy him. Nothing does, because Sideshow Bob without Bart Simpson is like a predator without prey. The hunt was the point. The obsession was the identity. With Bart dead, Bob is nothing. So Bob does something extraordinary. He resurrects Bart. Using some kind of scientific apparatus, he brings Bart back to life specifically so he can kill him again. And he does, multiple times. He kills Bart, resurrects him, kills him again, resurrects him again. Each death is different. Each resurrection is immediate. The segment becomes a loop of murder and rebirth, with Bob cycling through the act of killing Bart the way someone might replay a favorite song. He's addicted to it. He can't stop. The killing isn't about revenge anymore. It's about filling a void that nothing else can fill. The segment is trippy because it takes the show's most famous recurring antagonist and deconstructs him completely. Sideshow Bob has been trying to kill Bart since season 1. It's one of the longest running storylines in television history. And the segment says, okay, what if he actually did it? What then? The answer is existential emptiness. The answer is that some pursuits are only meaningful because they're never achieved. Some enemies are only valuable because they survive. Kill the thing you've been chasing your whole life and you don't find satisfaction. You find nothing. Treehouse of Horror 29. Season 30, Episode 4. Aired October 21st, 2018. The cold open of this episode deserves special attention because it's one of the most bizarre things the show has ever produced. The Simpsons arrive in Fogberryport, New England, a parody of the town of Innsmouth from H.P. Lovecraft's horror novella, The Shadow over Innsmouth. A book told them it was a place to visit before they die. It turns out to be a trap. They're meant to be devoured by Cthulhu, the ancient cosmic horror from Lovecraft's mythology. But Homer was promised an oyster-eating contest against Cthulhu, so they have one. Homer versus Cthulhu eating oysters, and Homer wins. The cosmic horror of the Lovecraftian universe is defeated by a fat man from Springfield who is slightly better at competitive eating than an ancient god. The family then decides to eat Cthulhu for dinner. The episode cuts to the Simpsons sitting around the table with Cthulhu in a cooking pot. Homer pokes at the creature's body and finds an ink sac. He pokes it too hard. It explodes. Ink splatters across the screen, revealing the episode's title. This cold open is trippy because it collapses two entirely incompatible universes. Lovecraft's cosmic horror is built on the idea that humanity is insignificant, that the universe is ruled by beings so vast and incomprehensible that human consciousness cannot process their existence without going insane. Cthulhu is supposed to be terrifying, unknowable, beyond human comprehension. And Homer eats him for dinner. The joke only works because The Simpsons has spent decades establishing that Homer Simpson can survive anything. He's been to space, he's been to the third dimension, he's eaten the merciless peppers of Quetzalcoatlanango. Cthulhu is just another thing on the menu. The third segment of the same episode is a parody of the M. Night Shyamalan film Split. Lisa develops multiple personalities after Bart ruins her spelling test by changing her answers and giving her a failing grade. The trauma of the academic failure causes Lisa to fracture. She creates an alternate identity named Penelope, who speaks with a British accent and is violently unstable. Penelope traps Bart, Milhouse, and Nelson in a cell after luring them with bottles of Sunny D laced with ketamine. She attacks and kills Nelson, knocks Milhouse into a recycling bin where he's transformed into a literal paperboy, and gives Bart one final chance to redeem himself. The segment is disturbing because it takes Lisa, the family's voice of reason and moral compass, and breaks her. Lisa's intelligence and sensitivity have always been her defining traits. Seeing those traits weaponized by trauma, seeing Lisa's brilliance turn toward cruelty and violence, is unsettling in the same way that Ned Flanders becoming a serial killer is unsettling. It violates the character. And in the Treehouse of Horror format, where violations have no consequences, the show is free to push these characters to their absolute darkest without worrying about continuity. These Treehouse of Horror segments across 36 installments spanning 3.5 decades represent the largest collection of trippy content in The Simpsons catalog. Each October, the writers get to throw out the rulebook. Characters can die, reality can bend, the animation can change, the tone can shift from comedy to genuine horror to surreal absurdism, and back again within a single 7-minute segment. It's a tradition that started on October 25th, 1990 with the very first Treehouse of Horror in Season 2, and it shows no signs of stopping. The first Treehouse of Horror, for the record, contained 3 segments. Bad Dream House, a parody of the Amityville Horror, where the Simpsons move into a haunted house that tries to possess them and eventually decides it would rather self-destruct than live with the family. Hungry Are the Damned, where the family is abducted by Kang and Kodos for the first time and fattened up for what appears to be a feast, though Lisa's suspicion may have been wrong. And The Raven, a faithful adaptation of Edgar Allan Poe's poem with Homer as the narrator and Bart as the Raven. Marge introduced the episode by warning viewers that the following program might give their children nightmares, and suggested that adults tuck their children into bed instead of writing angry letters to the network. That warning, delivered in Marge's unmistakable raspy voice, was both a joke and a genuine gesture of respect for the audience. The show knew it was doing something different with the Treehouse episodes, something that might genuinely disturb younger viewers. And rather than pretending otherwise, Marge acknowledged it directly. It set the tone for every treehouse that followed. This is going to be weird. This is going to be scary. This is going to be things you don't normally see on this show. You've been warned. 36 installments later, the Treehouse of Horror episodes have parodied or referenced hundreds of horror films, science fiction novels, fairy tales, video games, television shows, and cultural phenomena. They've sent The Simpsons to space, to hell, to alternate dimensions, to the past, to the future, and to realities where the laws of physics are suggestions rather than rules. They've killed Homer dozens of times. They've killed Bart. They've killed the entire family. They've turned characters into vampires, zombies, aliens, blobs, murderers, and cosmic horrors. And every November, when the episode airs, everything resets. The dead come back. The dimension heals. Springfield returns to normal, until next year. There's something deeply comforting about that cycle. The Treehouse of Horror episodes are the show's way of acknowledging that the world is scary and strange and full of things we don't understand. But they're also its way of saying that the familiar world, the yellow sky world of Springfield where Homer goes to work and Bart goes to school and Marge holds everything together, will always come back. The trips end, the nightmares fade, and in the morning, the Simpsons are still the Simpsons. But we're not done yet. The Simpsons' relationship with the surreal extends beyond specific episodes. There are moments scattered throughout the show's history, individual scenes and sequences within otherwise normal episodes that push the boundaries of what the show is supposed to be. Moments that feel like the writers left a door open to some other dimension and something slipped through before they could close it. Take Selma's Choice from Season 4. It aired on January 21st, 1993. It's mostly a straightforward episode about Selma babysitting the Simpson kids at an amusement park called Duff Gardens. But the episode contains one of the most iconic, trippy moments in the show's history. Lisa drinks the water on a ride called the Little Land of Duff. The water is contaminated, and Lisa starts hallucinating. The sequence is brief, maybe 30 seconds, but it's striking. Lisa's eyes dilate. The world around her becomes fluid and colorful. She starts seeing things that aren't there. The ride transforms into something sinister and beautiful simultaneously. The animation shifts into a psychedelic mode, with colors bleeding into each other and shapes melting. It's a 1960s-style drug trip compressed into the experience of an 8-year-old girl at a theme park, and it comes out of nowhere. One minute you're watching a standard family outing episode. The next minute, Lisa is tripping in a boat on contaminated water while Selma tries to figure out what's wrong with her. The show has done this kind of thing repeatedly. Last Exit to Springfield, also from Season 4, contains a scene where Lisa is given laughing gas at the dentist's office. The gas induces a brief but vivid hallucination, a psychedelic vision set to the Beatles' Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, or rather a legally distinct version of it. Lisa floats through a landscape of impossible colors surrounded by images that reference the 1960s counterculture, yellow submarine-style animation, and the general aesthetic of an acid trip. The scene lasts less than a minute, but it's so visually distinct from the rest of the episode that it stays with you long after the dental appointment is over. Homer Loves Flanders, Season 5, Episode 16, aired March 17, 1994. A mostly standard episode about Homer befriending Ned Flanders after Ned takes him to a football game. But there's a brief, infamous moment where the town's water supply gets spiked and Marge starts hallucinating in the kitchen. She takes a sip of water and the walls start melting, the cabinets drip with color. The roasting chicken in the oven comes to life and says, "Personally, I think I'm overdone." Marge, unfazed, casually remarks, "Oh, the walls are melting again." The key word there is again. This has happened before. Marge has experienced psychedelic episodes in her kitchen before and has apparently made peace with them. These scattered moments add up to something larger. They establish that Springfield exists on the edge of reality. It's a town where contaminated water causes LSD-like trips, where dental gas sends children into Yellow Submarine, where the walls melt and the food talks, and nobody seems all that surprised by it. The surreal isn't an exception in Springfield. It's a recurring feature. The town itself is a trippy place to live, even on days when nobody eats a weird pepper or falls through a portal. And then there's Bart Sells His Soul, Season 7, Episode 4. aired October 8, 1995, written by Greg Daniels, the same Greg Daniels who wrote the Time and Punishment segment of Treehouse of Horror 5 and would later create The Office and King of the Hill. This episode isn't psychedelic in the visual sense. There are no hallucination sequences or altered animation. But it might be the trippiest episode in the show's philosophical catalog because it asks a question that nobody expected The Simpsons to take seriously. Does Bart Simpson have a soul? The premise is simple. Milhouse dares Bart to sell his soul. Bart, who doesn't believe in the concept, writes Bart Simpson's soul on a piece of paper and sells it to Milhouse for $5. It's a joke, a prank, a way to get lunch money. But almost immediately, strange things start happening. Bart can't laugh. He watches comedy and feels nothing. He can't connect with people. Animals sense something wrong with him and flee. Automatic doors won't open for him as if the sensors can't detect his presence. Something fundamental has been removed from Bart, and the episode treats this removal with complete seriousness. The surreal quality of the episode comes from its commitment to the premise. The show doesn't wink at the audience. It doesn't suggest that Bart is imagining things or that there's a rational explanation. The episode genuinely proposes that Bart sold his soul and that the absence of it has physical, measurable consequences. Bart without a soul is not Bart. He's a shell, a body without an animating principle. And the episode earns its emotional resolution when Bart, desperate to get his soul back, discovers that Milhouse has traded it away. The soul has changed hands multiple times and Bart can't track it down. He ends up on his knees in the dark outside the church, praying. Bart Simpson, the boy who has never taken anything seriously in his life, on his knees, asking God or whoever is listening to give him his soul back, and someone does. Lisa, she bought it back for him. The episode ends with Bart recovering, laughing again, feeling whole. And you believe it. You believe that a piece of paper with Bart Simpson's soul written on it in crayon actually contains something essential and real. That's trippy. Not because of what you see, but because of what you accept. The episode has been analyzed by religious scholars and philosophers, Karma Waltonen and Denise Duvernay, in their book, The Simpsons in the Classroom. Embiggening the Learning Experience with the Wisdom of Springfield, published by McFarland, used this episode as a teaching tool for discussions about metaphysics, religion, and the nature of consciousness. The Simpsons, a show about a yellow cartoon family being used in university-level philosophy courses to discuss the existence of the soul. If that isn't trippy, nothing is. Let's talk about one more canonical episode before we close. The Man Who Came to Be Dinner, Season 26, Episode 10, aired January 4th, 2015. This episode does something that the show had carefully avoided for 25 years. It takes Kang and Kodos, the Halloween aliens, and puts them in a regular, canonical episode. This is significant because the show had always maintained a boundary between the Treehouse of Horror universe, where aliens and supernatural events are real, and the regular universe, where they're not. The Man Who Came to Be Dinner breaks that boundary. The family visits a theme park called Disneyland, an obvious parody of Disneyland. They get on a ride called Rocket to Your Doom. The ride turns out to be an actual spaceship. The Simpsons are abducted and taken to Rigel 7, the home planet of Kang and Kodos. They're exhibited in a zoo. They're studied by alien scientists. Eventually, the Rigelians decide to eat them. But it turns out the Simpsons are too toxic because of their fast food diet. Their bodies are so saturated with processed food that they're essentially inedible. The episode is deliberately unsettling because it shouldn't exist. The audience has been trained to understand that Kang and Kodos belong in the Treehouse episodes. Seeing them in a regular episode, interacting with the Simpsons in a canonical context, creates a cognitive dissonance that the episode never fully resolves. Are we supposed to believe that the Simpsons were actually abducted by aliens? Is this really canon? The show plays it straight enough that you're never sure, and that uncertainty, that refusal to tell the audience what's real and what isn't, is its own kind of trip. There's also Behind the Laughter, Season 11, Episode 22, which aired May 21st, 2000. This is the season finale, and it's formatted as a VH1 behind-the-music mockumentary about the Simpson family. The Simpsons aren't presented as fictional characters. They're presented as real people who star in a television show called The Simpsons. The documentary covers their rise to fame, their creative conflicts, their personal problems, and their eventual reconciliation. Marge has a nightclub act. Bart stars in a syndicated action show. Lisa writes a tell-all book. Homer follows a career in theater. The entire episode exists in a metaspace where the Simpsons are simultaneously fictional characters and real people playing fictional versions of themselves on a show that is also somehow a documentary. The layers of reality are dizzying. Who are the real Simpsons, the ones we see every week, or the ones in the documentary who are actors playing the ones we see every week? The episode never answers this question because answering it would collapse the joke. The trippiness isn't in the visuals, it's in the ontology. The episode makes you question what level of reality you're watching. And that's exactly the kind of question that should keep you up at night, or if you're listening to this at the right volume, gently carry you to sleep. At the very end of the Behind the Laughter episode, the narrator casually mentions that the Simpson family lives in northern Kentucky. After 11 seasons of the show deliberately hiding which state Springfield is in, the episode just says it, Kentucky. It's thrown away in a single line, and nobody knows if it's true, because the episode itself is a fiction pretending to be a documentary about fictions pretending to be real. The truth about Springfield's location is buried under so many layers of unreality that it might as well be nowhere, which is exactly where Springfield has always been, everywhere and nowhere, real and not real, familiar and fundamentally strange. That's the thread that connects every episode we've talked about tonight. They're all about the gap between what seems real and what actually is. Homer's hallucinations seemed real until he woke up on a golf course. The Lego world seemed real until Homer noticed the cracks. The cult seemed real until the spaceship turned out to be a wooden frame. Homer's memories seemed real until the truth rewrote them. His intelligence seemed real until the crayon went back in. The alien in the woods seemed real until Mr. Burns walked out of the shadows. The Simpsons has been exploring this gap for 37 years. The show has always understood that reality is negotiable, that the world we see depends on who's looking, what they've eaten, what they believe, and whether there's a crayon in their brain. The trippy episodes don't break the rules of the show. They reveal the truth about the show that was always there. Springfield isn't a normal town. It never was. It's a place where the walls melt, where the dead come back, where dolphins wage war, where a man can sell his soul for $5 and feel the loss in his bones. These aren't glitches in the system. They're features. They're what makes Springfield feel alive in a way that a more realistic show could never achieve. The Simpsons can go anywhere because it was never tethered to one place to begin with. It exists in the space between the familiar and the impossible. And on nights like tonight, when we've walked through the desert with the space coyote, fallen through the portal into the third dimension, watched the town drink psychedelic juice, and read a letter from a version of Homer who no longer exists, that space feels wider and stranger and more beautiful than it ever has. The Simpsons premiered on December 17, 1989, a simple show about a simple family in a simple town. Over 800 episodes later, that simple town has contained multitudes, alternate dimensions, hallucinated deserts, Lego worlds, cults, aliens, coyotes who speak with the voice of Johnny Cash, a crayon that explains everything, a lighthouse run by a machine, a pyramid that was really a pro shop, a paper that says Bart Simpson's soul, a fog that turns people inside out. And through all of it, the show comes back. Every week, the opening credits play. The family races to the couch. Homer eats his donut. The bus drops Bart off. Lisa plays her saxophone. Maggie gets scanned at the supermarket. The world resets. The trips end. Springfield is Springfield again. Until next time. The show has been renewed through season 40. Matt Selman has been announced as the sole showrunner from season 38 onward, with Al Jean moving to consulting producer. The Treehouse of Horror tradition continues, with number 36 airing as part of season 37. New episodes air on Fox and stream on Disney+, which has become the primary global home for all 35+ completed seasons. The show surpassed 1 billion hours streamed on Disney+ during 2025, according to an announcement from Disney in December of that year. Nielsen reported The Simpsons as the 10th most streamed acquired program of 2022, accumulating 15.87 billion minutes of watch time. Numbers like that mean that somewhere, right now, someone is watching The Simpsons. Maybe they're watching a regular episode, Homer going to work, Bart failing a test, Lisa saving the world one saxophone solo at a time. But maybe they're watching one of the episodes we talked about tonight. Maybe they're watching Homer eat those peppers and enter the desert for the first time. Maybe they're watching the Lego world dissolve. Maybe they're watching Bart on his knees outside the church, praying for something he didn't know he could lose. Whatever they're watching, they're in Springfield, and Springfield, as we've seen tonight, is the trippiest place on television. A town where anything can happen. A town where the walls melt and the chickens talk and the coyotes give life advice. A town that has been on the air for 37 years and shows no signs of stopping, so settle in. Close your eyes if you haven't already. Let the yellow glow of Springfield fade into something warm and soft and far away. The episodes are over. The stories are told. The desert is quiet. The pyramid is just a pro shop. The coyote is just a dog. And Homer is home, on his couch, where he belongs. Safe, stupid, happy. Good night, Springfield. Good night. Actually, before we let Springfield go quiet for the night, there are a few more corners of the show's surreal landscape worth walking through. We've covered the major episodes, the ones that most fans point to when they talk about the trippiest Simpsons moments. But the show's relationship with the strange goes deeper than individual episodes. There are entire eras of the show that leaned into the surreal as a guiding philosophy. And there are episodes that bend reality not through hallucinations or alternate dimensions, but through something more subtle, through structure, through perspective, through the way a story is told. Trilogy of Error, Season 12, Episode 18, aired April 29, 2001. This episode is structured like the film Rashomon, telling three interconnected storylines that overlap and intersect. The same day is shown from three different perspectives: Homer's, Lisa's, and Bart's. Events that seem random or inexplicable in one character's storyline are revealed to have causes and consequences in another character's storyline. A car crash that Homer causes has ripple effects that touch Lisa's science fair project and Bart's encounter with a fireworks dealer. The episode is trippy, not because anything supernatural happens, but because the structure of the episode itself creates a disorienting experience. You watch the same events from different angles. You see how one person's actions create another person's reality. The timeline folds and overlaps. Characters pass through the background of each other's stories without knowing it. By the end, when all three timelines converge, the full picture emerges, and everything that seemed random suddenly makes perfect sense. It's a Rubik's Cube of storytelling, and solving it gives you the same kind of satisfaction that a good puzzle does. The episode demonstrates something important about the show's approach to trippiness. You don't need drugs or aliens to make reality feel unstable. You just need to change the angle. Show people the same day from three different perspectives, and suddenly the day itself feels unreal. Because we all walk through the world believing that our perspective is the complete picture. Trilogy of Error reminds us that it's not. Our version of events is one slice of a much larger, more complex reality. And the other slices might contradict everything we think we know. Then there's A Serious Flanders from season 33. This is a two-part episode, which is unusual for The Simpsons. The show has only done a handful of multi-part episodes in its entire run. Who Shot Mr. Burns was a two-parter in season 6 and 7. The Great Fatsby was an hour-long episode in season 28. A Serious Flanders, airing in 2021 as part of the show's modern renaissance under showrunner Matt Selman, is a non-canon limited series crime drama. It's a pastiche of prestige television: Fargo, No Country for Old Men, Breaking Bad. The color palette shifts to muted tones, the pacing slows down, the violence becomes consequential rather than cartoonish. Characters die and stay dead, at least within the two-part story. Ned Flanders is at the center of it. He's caught up in a criminal scheme involving stolen money, a dangerous hitman, and moral compromises that would be unthinkable in a regular episode. The Simpsons, a show famous for its couch gags and cutaway jokes, suddenly looks and feels like a Coen Brothers film. The humor is still there, but it's dark humor, gallows humor. The kind of humor that makes you uncomfortable because you're not sure if you're supposed to be laughing. A Serious Flanders is trippy because it feels like a different show wearing the Simpsons skin. The characters look the same, the voices are the same, but everything else has changed. The tone, the pacing, the visual style, the narrative stakes. It's The Simpsons if The Simpsons had been created by someone who watches too much HBO. And the dissonance between the familiar characters and the unfamiliar tone creates a sensation that's genuinely strange. You know these people. You've been watching them for 30 years, but you don't recognize what they're doing or the world they're doing it in. This kind of tonal trippiness has become more common in the show's modern era. Season 34 featured experimental formats, including episodes that broke the fourth wall and parodied horror in full-length episodes rather than the usual 3-segment treehouse format. Season 36 included Shoddy Heat, which explored Grandpa Simpson's past in a noir style, with black and white sequences and hard-boiled narration. The show has become increasingly willing to abandon its own aesthetic conventions, trying on new visual and narrative styles the way someone might try on coats at a department store. And then there are the future episodes. The Simpsons has visited the future several times throughout its run, and each visit reveals a Springfield that's both recognizable and profoundly different. Lisa's Wedding, Season 6, Episode 19, aired March 19, 1995. It's set in the year 2010 when Lisa's getting married. The episode was made in 1995, so 2010 was 15 years in the future. The writers imagined a world of video phones, automated libraries, and rolling news tickers. Some of their predictions were remarkably accurate, others were hilariously wrong. But the emotional core of the episode, Lisa's struggle to find someone who accepts her for who she is, was timeless. Bart to the Future, Season 11, Episode 17, aired March 19, 2000. This is the famous episode that depicted Lisa as the first heterosexual female president of the United States, inheriting a country destroyed by the previous administration of President Donald Trump. The episode aired in March 2000, 16 years before Donald Trump was actually elected president in November 2016. The show's writers have been asked about this supposed prediction many times. The consensus is that Trump as president was chosen as a joke, the most absurd thing the writers could think of that would leave the country in terrible shape. The fact that it actually happened speaks either to the show's prophetic power or to the absurdity of reality itself. Either way, it's one of the most famous examples of what fans call Simpsons predictions, a phenomenon where jokes and plot points from old episodes appear to foreshadow real-world events. The show's prediction track record is statistically less impressive than it seems. With over 800 episodes and tens of thousands of jokes, some of them are bound to align with future events by pure coincidence. An episode from 1998 called When You Dish Upon a Star showed 20th Century Fox as a division of Walt Disney Company, which became reality in 2019 when Disney completed its acquisition of 21st Century Fox's entertainment assets. The show has also been credited with predicting smartwatches, autocorrect failures, and various political events. Most of these predictions are coincidences arising from the show's massive volume and its willingness to satirize every aspect of contemporary life. But the cumulative effect is eerie. It makes Springfield feel like a place that exists slightly ahead of our own timeline, as if the town is a few years in the future and the rest of us are just catching up. The future episodes are trippy because they remind us that the Simpsons family exists in a state of permanent present tense. The characters don't age, Bart is always 10, Lisa is always 8, Homer is always 36 or 38 or 39, depending on which episode you ask. The show uses what's called a floating timeline. Flashbacks that were originally set in the 1970s have been re-anchored to the 1990s in later episodes, because Homer and Marge can't have been teenagers in the 1970s if the show is still airing in the 2020s. Time moves around The Simpsons while The Simpsons stay still. They're fixed points in a shifting universe. This creates a strange existential situation for the characters. They're always the same age, but the world around them keeps changing. Technology advances, presidents come and go, cultural references evolve. Springfield gets smartphones and streaming services and social media, but Bart never turns 11. It's a subtle kind of trippiness that you don't notice until you think about it. And once you do, it reframes the entire show. The Simpsons aren't a family living in a town. They're a family trapped in a loop. A beautiful, comfortable, inescapable loop where the seasons change and the Halloween episodes come and go, and nobody ever gets older and nobody ever really changes. Unless, of course, a Guatemalan insanity pepper breaks the loop, or a crayon gets removed, or a portal opens behind the bookcase, or the water supply gets spiked. or the cult comes to town, or the memory doesn't match the morning, or the world turns out to be made of Lego. In those moments, the loop cracks. The characters see something real, something true, something that exists outside the yellow sky, four-fingered comfort zone of their everyday lives. And for a few minutes, Springfield becomes the trippiest place on earth. But the loop always heals. The cracks seal. Homer goes back to his couch. Bart goes back to his skateboard. Lisa goes back to her saxophone. Marge goes back to holding everything together with a patience that borders on superhuman. The family returns to the beginning. The credits roll, and somewhere, a talking dog find your soulmate, and Homer says, "Damn straight." The show premiered on December 17th, 1989. Written by Mimi Pond, directed by David Silverman. Homer Simpson got a job as a department store Santa Claus and used his paycheck to adopt a greyhound named Santa's Little Helper. It was simple, it was funny, it was warm. And it was the beginning of the longest, strangest, most unpredictable journey in the history of American television. 800 episodes, 37 seasons, renewed through 40, 1 billion hours streamed, 36 Treehouse of Horrors, 1 banned episode, 1 crayon, 1 coyote. One question that still hasn't been answered: is Marge really Homer's soulmate? The coyote would say no, Homer would say yes. And the show would say it doesn't matter, because the question is what keeps you watching. The question is what keeps you coming back. The question is what makes Springfield feel like a place you've been to, even though it doesn't exist. Even though it's drawn, even though the characters have 4 fingers and yellow skin and the sky is always the wrong color. Springfield is the trippiest place on television because it asks you to believe in it. And you do. Every time. For 37 years. You believe in the town that doesn't exist. You care about the family that isn't real. You laugh at jokes written by people you've never met about situations that could never happen in a world that was built from construction paper and imagination. That's the real trip. Not the peppers, not the portals, not the Lego. The real trip is that you're lying here right now listening to someone describe a cartoon desert where a man met a talking coyote, and you feel something. You feel the warmth of the story. You feel the weight of Homer's question. You feel the gentle sadness of Lisa reading a letter from a father who no longer remembers writing it. That's the power of a good story told well about a town called Springfield. And that's where we'll leave it tonight. Good night, sleep well. And if you hear a coyote outside your window, don't worry. He's probably just lost. Or maybe he's exactly where he needs to be. Telling some other confused soul to find the person they're looking for, the way all good guides do, quietly, patiently, under a sky that's the wrong color, in a desert that's really just a golf course. Good night. There's one more thing worth mentioning before we truly close our eyes. Something about the way the show is made that contributes to its trippy quality in ways most viewers never think about. The Simpsons takes approximately 6 months to produce a single episode. 6 months, from the initial idea being pitched in the writer's room to the finished product airing on Fox. The process involves multiple rounds of outlining, drafting, room rewrites, table reads, animatics, and late rewrites. 154 people have been credited with writing or co-writing at least one episode as of January 2026. The most prolific individual writer in the show's history is John Swartzwelder, who is credited on 59 episodes. The original writer's room during the golden era included names like George Meyer, the man who pitched the Chili Pepper episode, John Vitti, Jeff Martin, Conan O'Brien, who wrote Marge vs. the Monorail during seasons 3 and 4 before leaving for late-night television, David X. Cohen, who would later co-create Futurama with Matt Groening. These people sat in a room together and imagined a town into existence, a town so detailed and alive that it feels like a real place, even though it has never existed anywhere except on paper, on screen, and in the minds of the people who watch it. The original music for the show was composed by Danny Elfman, who wrote the theme in 1989. He reportedly composed it on the drive home from his initial meeting with Groening and has described it as one of his easiest compositions. It's also, by his own admission, the most popular piece in his career. The theme has never been replaced, though it was rearranged in Season 2 and given its current arrangement by Alf Clausen at the start of Season 3. Clausen served as the show's primary composer from Season 2 through Season 28, scoring or orchestrating music for nearly 600 episodes over 27 years. He conducted a 35-piece orchestra for the show's underscore. He won 2 Emmy Awards for original music and lyrics and was nominated for 21 Emmys for The Simpsons alone. He won 5 Annie Awards for the show. He was fired in 2017 as a cost-cutting measure and subsequently sued, though the case was settled or dismissed. Alf Clausen died on May 29, 2025, at the age of 84. After his departure, the show's music has been handled primarily by Bleeding Fingers Music, a company co-founded by Hans Zimmer. The Simpsons movie score from 2007 was composed by Zimmer himself. The music matters because it's one of the things that makes the trippy episodes work. When Homer enters the desert in El Viaje Misterioso, the score shifts into something ethereal and dissonant. When Lisa drinks the contaminated water at Duff Gardens, the music dissolves into a warped, dreamy haze. When Homer falls into the third dimension, the soundtrack becomes sparse and digital, matching the cold geometry of the CGI world. Clausen understood that music is the emotional architecture of a scene. It tells you how to feel before your brain has time to decide for itself. And in the trippy episodes, the music tells you that the rules have changed, that you're not in Springfield anymore, that something fundamental has shifted. The animation itself has evolved dramatically over the show's run. The first season, which aired from 1989 to 1990, featured rougher animation and characters whose designs hadn't fully settled into their definitive forms. The early episodes have a looser, more hand-drawn quality that gives them a warmth the later, more polished seasons sometimes lack. The shift to high-definition widescreen began with Season 20, which debuted a new HD opening sequence in 2009. The aspect ratio changed from 4 to 3 to 16 to 9, widening the frame and adding detail to the backgrounds. Disney Plus eventually added a 4:3 viewing option for classic episodes after fans complained that the widescreen crop cut off visual gags that were originally framed for the narrower aspect ratio. That correction was implemented on May 28, 2020. The production of animation for the show has historically been split between Los Angeles and South Korea. The creative team in LA handles writing, voice recording, storyboarding, and key animation. The labor-intensive process of in-betweening, coloring, and compositing is done by studios in South Korea, a common practice in American television animation. This division of labor is why David Silverman's decision to personally animate the chili pepper hallucination sequence was so significant. He broke the normal production pipeline because he didn't trust anyone else to get it right. He wanted the desert, the coyote, the pyramid, the melting sun, all of it, to look exactly as he imagined. And because he did the work himself, it does. The hallucination sequence in El Viaje Misterioso has a handmade quality that distinguishes it from anything else in the show. You can feel the attention in every frame, you can see the care, and that care is part of what makes the sequence feel real, even though it's depicting something completely impossible. The voice cast has been remarkably stable throughout the show's history. Dan Castellaneta voices Homer, Barney, Grandpa, Krusty, Groundskeeper Willie, Mayor Quimby, and dozens of others. Julie Kavner voices Marge and her sisters Patty and Selma. Nancy Cartwright voices Bart, Ralph Wiggum, Nelson, and Todd Flanders. Yeardley Smith voices Lisa. Hank Azaria voiced Mo, Chief Wiggum, Comic Book Guy, Professor Frink, and Apu, though he stopped voicing Apu in 2020 following the controversy sparked by Hari Kondabolu's 2017 documentary, The Problem with Apu. Harry Shearer voices Mr. Burns, Smithers, Ned Flanders, Principal Skinner, and many others. These 6 actors have created hundreds of distinct characters over 37 years. When you hear Homer's voice, you're hearing a performance that Dan Castellaneta has been refining since 1989. When you hear Lisa, you're hearing Yeardley Smith doing something that nobody else in the world can do, giving an 8-year-old cartoon girl a soul that's been consistent for over 3 decades. The consistency of the voice cast is another reason the trippy episodes land so hard. When Homer's voice changes during the HOMR episode, becoming clearer and more articulate after the crayon is removed, Castellaneta doesn't use a different voice. He uses the same voice, slightly adjusted. The Homer who is suddenly intelligent still sounds like Homer, and that's devastating. because it means the intelligent Homer was always in there. Under the slurring and the doze and the confused pauses, there was always a man who could speak clearly. The crayon didn't create a new person. It just silenced the person who was already there. The same principle applies to every Trippy episode we've discussed. The characters are the same, the voices are the same, the world looks the same, at least at first. What changes is the context. What changes is the lens. The Trippy episodes don't take you to a different show. They take you to a different version of the same show, a version where the familiar is slightly off-center, where the comfortable is slightly wrong, where the safe is slightly dangerous, and that's more unsettling than any amount of visual psychedelia could ever be. Because you can dismiss a hallucination, you can explain away a strange vision, but you can't dismiss the feeling that the world you've been living in your whole life might not be quite what you thought it was. That's the feeling these episodes give you. Not fear, not confusion, something quieter, something that sits in the back of your mind after the episode ends. A gentle unease, a small question. What if? What if there's a crayon in your brain and you don't know it? What if the world you're living in is made of Lego and you can't see the seams? What if the person you love isn't your soulmate and a coyote in the desert could tell you who is? What if your memories of last night are wrong? What if the aliens are real, but they're just your boss on medication? What if you sold something essential about yourself for $5 and you can feel the absence, but you don't know what's missing? These are the questions that make The Simpsons more than a sitcom. They're the questions that make Springfield more than a town. And they're the questions that, if you let them, will carry you gently into sleep, not because they're boring, but because they're the kind of questions that the mind turns over and over, slowly, peacefully, like a river polishing a stone. They don't need answers, they just need space. And tonight, we've given them plenty. The theme song was composed on a drive home. The town was built from imagination. The characters were drawn with 4 fingers because it's easier to animate. The show has been on the air since the year the Berlin Wall fell. And somewhere in the middle of all that, between the couch gags and the doze and the treehouse of horrors, the writers found something true. Something about the way humans experience reality. Something about the thin, permeable membrane between what we know and what we don't. Something about the way a hot pepper or a broken toaster or a piece of paper with the word soul written on it can crack that membrane wide open and show us something we weren't expecting to see. Springfield is quiet now. The lights on Evergreen Terrace are off. Homer's on the couch. Marge is upstairs. Bart and Lisa are in their rooms. Maggie is in her crib, pacifier in her mouth, eyes closed. The town is sleeping. The whole strange, impossible, beautiful town is sleeping. And so should you. Good night. One last thought. If you've been listening this whole time, you've spent roughly 2 hours in Springfield. 2 hours walking through deserts and hallucinations and alternate timelines and Lego worlds and cult compounds and memory puzzles. 2 hours with a family that doesn't exist in a town that was never built. And yet you know these people. You know Homer's voice. You know the sound Marge makes when she's disappointed. You know the way Lisa sighs before she explains something nobody asked about. You know Bart's laugh. You know the soft click of Maggie's pacifier. You know them because they've been in your life for 37 years, or however many years you've been watching. They were there when you were a kid staying up late. They were there when you were a teenager flipping through channels. They were there when you were an adult scrolling through Disney Plus looking for something comforting. The Simpsons is one of those rare pieces of culture that spans generations without trying. It doesn't chase trends, it doesn't reinvent itself, it just keeps being itself week after week, year after year, decade after decade. And somewhere in that persistence, in that stubborn refusal to change, the show became a kind of constant, a fixed point, something you can always go back to. The trippy episodes we've explored tonight are the exceptions. They're the moments where the show breaks its own rules. But they only work because the rules exist in the first place. You can only appreciate the desert hallucination because you know what Springfield normally looks like. You can only feel the strangeness of Lego Homer because you've spent hundreds of hours with regular Homer. You can only understand the tragedy of the crayon because you've watched for years the man it created. The trips matter because the ordinary matters. The weird is only weird in contrast to the normal. And the normal in Springfield is pretty wonderful. A dad who loves his family even though he can barely function. A mom who keeps the household running through sheer force of will. A boy who will never grow up, and a girl who was born grown up. A baby who communicates through silence and occasional gunfire. A town full of people who are flawed and foolish and fundamentally decent most of the time, when it counts. That's the world you're drifting away from right now. A good world, a warm world, a world where the sun is always yellow and the grass is always green, and the house on Evergreen Terrace always has the lights on. A world where the craziest things imaginable can happen and everything still turns out okay by the end of the half hour. The Simpsons, created by Matt Groening, first aired December 17th, 1989. Still going, still strange, still home, sleep tight, and if you dream tonight, maybe you'll dream of a desert. A quiet desert with a sky the wrong color and a sun that shatters when you touch it. There'll be a tortoise moving slowly across the sand. Don't kick it, it's trying to help. Follow it. It'll take you to a pyramid or maybe a pro shop, and at the top, you'll find a coyote sitting there like he's been waiting for you. He'll have the voice of someone kind, someone who sounds like he's been around for a long time and has seen everything and isn't impressed by any of it, but loves it all anyway. He'll ask you a question, just one, and you won't know the answer. But that's okay. The question is the point. It's always been the point. The Simpsons understood that from the very beginning. The question is what keeps you watching. The question is what keeps you thinking. The question is what makes a yellow cartoon family feel as real as the people sleeping in the next room. Find your soulmate, the coyote says, and then he's gone. And the desert is gone, and the pyramid is just a building in the distance, and you're back in your bed or your couch or wherever you fell asleep tonight, and the world is exactly as it was before. Nothing changed, nothing shifted, the walls aren't melting, the chicken isn't talking, the water's just water. But somewhere very far away in a town that doesn't exist, in a house on a street called Evergreen Terrace, Homer Simpson is sleeping too. And maybe he's dreaming of the same desert. And maybe the coyote is asking him the same question. And maybe after all these years, he still doesn't know the answer. But he's got Marge, and that's close enough. Good night, everyone. See you in Springfield.